My comment keeps vanishing. Posted, refresh the page, vanishes. I just felt like writing back to this chap, bulwark. Even if Trump disappears and Trumpism isn't a thing anymore, you will still have a large portion of the population that has learned that being hateful is okay, that being despicable can get you somewhere. So I wrote, how blinker do you have to be as an adult to believe that being despicable will disqualify you from getting what you want? That's just world fallacy at its core. Clearly, there are many people who bought into this built-in justness prior to November 2024. If anything, it's amusing to see such cope worldviews burst before undeniable evidence. Then again, you can't entirely blame naive people for taking this long to grasp the obvious. Philosophical pessimism remains taboo, intensely taboo, especially in optimistic America. We're so proudly optimistic. Remains taboo, even in institutions of higher learning that ought to teach it fairly and comprehensibly. I get that Mump takes the bad guys prevail theme to the next level, but still, none of it should be surprising to hard-nosed observers of the reality, and especially to those, I think I wanted to say something else, of the reality? The sad reality? I don't know. Hard-nosed observers of reality, and especially to those who've looked into the history of this wretched world. So perfectly fine comment. No swear words, no links, no nothing. So mine is just one of 22 replies. Mine should be reply number 23. And it shows, but what happens? What happens when you do a little, you don't even have to refresh the page, right? You just go. Okay, maybe it does show. Maybe it shows. But I had to do it, I had to post it the second time because it didn't show the first time. Yeah, good. I've kind of, this is the kind of comment you can make in at least half of the videos. When you scroll to the comments, someone will say something like that, like at least half the time. And it's like, I've been wanting to leave one such comment for months, and today's the day, I guess. But let's refresh and see if we get it again.
DOJ.
Yes.
Because
Tim,
that's something they're going to do.
And, they're doing a fine job covering the latest. But then, see, back to 22 only. Back to 22 only. What's wrong with my comment, YouTube? I think YouTube's psychopathic. That's what's going on. YouTube is psychopathically censorious. It was a perfectly fine, perfect comment. But it just goes poof. Did Bulwark block me? I've never commented on any Bulwark video that I can recall. Perfectly fine, correction and kind of, gleeful correction of the naive, blinkered people. That being despicable can get you somewhere prior to November 2024. It just was the case. If you observed the world, being despicable couldn't get you somewhere. It precluded you. And being good opened doors to success. Anyway, I'm actually more pissed off that I'm letting on, because, it was a kind of, I'm not going to say it's a lengthy reply, but it was a, it was more than a couple of lines, right? I commented, and it was more than a couple of lines, and it should stay. It should stay, but it's not going to stay. Watch, I'll refresh again. It's not going to stay. Shut up, Tim. Shut up, Tim. I'm gonna make more gay jokes in this video, but fewer than in the last video. Because last video I kind of took it far. But let's see if I can. Hey, it says 23 now. But how much you want to bet it's not mine? How much you want to bet it's someone else who has number 23 now instead of me? Yeah, I don't know. Mine should be the last one, but it's not. But it says 23 replies now, so. What's going on? Screw it.
As I lay down again, humiliated, disgusted, and frightened by the thing that had been done to me, I reflected now, at least they would leave me alone. But no, not a bit of it. There was another treatment coming, the mustard poultice, seemingly a matter of routine like the hot bath. 2 slatternly nurses had already got the poultice ready, and they lashed it round my chest as tight as a straitjacket, while some men, who were wandering about the ward in shirt and trousers, began to collect it round my bed with half-sympathetic grins. I learned later that watching a patient have a mustard poultice was a favorite pastime in the ward.
It's so bad, though. It's so bad. And it's so true. You gotta give it the full spin. I'm just gonna give you a little blip.
These things are normally applied for a quarter of an hour, and certainly they are funny enough if you don't happen to be the person inside. For the first 5 minutes, the pain
It's the nature of the world we live in.
is severe, but you believe you can bear it.
Blessings? What are you smoking? Listen, it's the nature of the world we live in. Right here, Orwell knew. Orwell, the Tacit Pessimist. Orwell, the Tacit Pessimist. Orwell knew. It's a psychopathic world. You know, this isn't fiction.
Second 5
This is
per hour, and certainly
autobiographical.
they are funny enough if you don't happen to be the person inside.
Yeah.
For the first 5 minutes, the pain is severe, but you believe you can bear it.
It's so bad.
During the second 5 minutes, this belief evaporates, but the poultice is buckled at the back and you can't get it off. This is the period the onlookers most enjoy.
They were supposed to be treating him.
During the last 5 minutes, I noted a sort of numbness supervenes.
He went for treatment.
After the poultice had been removed, a waterproof pillow packed with ice was thrust beneath my head, and I was
But was that the style, or did he just not know how to do both sides?
left alone.
Hang on.
Minutes. I noted a sort of numbness supervenes.
Oh.
After the poultice had been removed, a waterproof pillow packed with ice was thrust beneath my head, and I was left alone.
Refreshments.
I did not sleep, and to the best of my knowledge, this was the only night of my life, the only night spent in bed, in which I have not slept at all, not even a minute.
It's so bad.
During my first hour in the Hôpital X, I had a whole series of different and contradictory treatments, but this was misleading. For in general,
I can't quite picture it, though. I just keep picturing Opus-Dei shit, which might not be fair to Opus-Dei, but then again, it might.
very little
Hang on. What is it called?
During my first hour in the Hôpital X, I had a whole series of different and contradictory treatments,
Some kind of cousin to Opus-Dei.
but this was misleading.
Must be.
For in general, you got very little treatment at all, either good or bad, unless you were ill in some interesting and instructive way. At 5 in the morning, the nurses...
Am I supposed to know what the institution is? Is it common knowledge? I don't think it's common knowledge. Watch, I'm going to upload this and not even research it.
came round.
I don't care. But it's so...
in general, you
it's just really gruesome. You got to take the whole thing for a spin.
Very little
But I keep picturing Opus-Dei shit.
treatment at all, either good or bad, unless you were ill in some interesting and instructive way. At 5 in the morning, the nurses came round, woke the patients, and took their temperatures, but did not wash them. If you were well enough, you washed yourself. Otherwise, you depended on the kindness of some walking patient. It was generally patients, too, who carried the bed bottles and the grim bedpan nicknamed La Casserole. At 8, breakfast arrived, called army fashion La Soupe. It was soup, too, a thin vegetable soup with slimy hunks of bread floating about in it. Later in the day, the tall, solemn, black-bearded doctor made his rounds, with an intern and a troop of breakfast arrived.
No.
Called army fashion La Soupe.
I can't.
It was soup, too.
I can't.
A thin vegetable soup with slimy hunks of bread floating about.
I did it. That's the image, though. That's the image from this essay, and I did it. I slowed it. Why did I slow it down?
The doctor made his rounds, with an intern and a troop of students following at his heels. But there were about 60 of us in the ward, and it was
Because it's the nature of the world we live in. That's why I slowed it down.
evident that he had other wards to attend to as well.
The world is a slimy bread and stale soup.
There were many beds,
And,
past which he walked
expired vegetables in
day
it.
after day, sometimes followed by imploring cries.
It's no wonder people don't want to pay attention to the nature of the world we live in.
On the other hand, if you had
While others are, jaded beyond comprehension. While certain others, they're like, I'm going to pay attention to the nature of the world we live in. And then they end up jaded beyond comprehension. It's like the statement, man can do right by politics. Man can do right by poll. Right? They're so jaded beyond comprehension. I have perfect comprehension. Some people are so jaded, they're jaded beyond their own comprehension, they discombobulate themselves and end up believing like it's dogmatic to think that man can ever do right by politics. Clearly, man can do right by politics. Here's one man who did right by politics. You know, he did politics and he spoke out against totalitarianism of all kinds. George Orwell as man who does right by politics. Even though he was just an author and never attained any political power, but he swayed people, you know. So in a sense, Orwell is the man who did right, even though he did politics. But here it's about how the poor died because of some Opus-Dei shit. Some grim, you know, the world is a slimy bread and stale soup type shit. And it's like, yes, no wonder they want to flee from the truth, you know. But then why do the others have to be jaded beyond comprehension? Why can't I cultivate an actual sensible listenership / I'll go back to writing blog posts. Why can't I cultivate some sensibly headed people who neither flee from the truth of the world nor are jaded beyond comprehension, their own comprehension? They discombobulate their own comprehension of the simplest things because of how motherfucking jaded they are and have to be, and how afraid of their own political feelings they are, and how they want to suppress their own political feelings and attitudes and any kind of affect because they're stupid, putrid, error minimalists and alcoholics.
Some disease with which the students wanted to familiarize themselves, you got plenty of attention of a kind. I myself, with an exceptionally fine specimen of a bronchial rattle, sometimes had as many as a dozen students.
Clearly, the world improved. Clearly, the horror with which this meets us. Clearly, the world improved.
Up to listen to my...
You know, now watch my video, The Great Repression. It had a lot on these institutions of yore. You know, there were these institutions of yore where the infirm were mistreated, to put it lightly. The infirm of all stripes. You know, you have all stripes of infirm. Even he was infirm in at least like 3 ways. He was infirm. You can be physically or mentally or psychologically infirm. And the infirm are very often poor. And so he found himself being mistreated among the poors. Among the poors. Yes, the have-nots. Sometimes there really are clear-cut have-nots. And they used to die awfully. And because fascists are in power, oh, fine. And because reactionaries are in power, you know, this is going to happen again. Except now the poor are going to die in El Salvador. Not even the poor. You know, the wrongly pigmented, the wrongly skinned, the wrongly tattooed, the wrongly stamped, you know, the wrongly treated are going to die in El Salvadorian prisons, like the poor died in this hellhole he's describing. And none of it had to happen. You know, things got better, and now they're getting worse. I didn't think I'd tie it to El Salvador, but how do you not talk about El Salvador? How do you not talk about those images? How do you just keep insisting it's just the same old story? Everyone is a hack. Everyone is susceptible to a sufficient degree of hackery that we might as well not bother. And we can't tell fact from fiction, you know, because we're just that stupid. Is that it? You know, we can't really tell fact from fiction. You know, maybe Putin's the truth teller after all. Maybe Putin's every bit as truth telly as the rest of them, or, you know, lie spouty as the rest of them. Nah, this shit can be quantified. I'm here to quantify some of this shit. You know. Nobody lies like Fraudster and company. Nobody lies and then alacrity like Fraudster and company. You know, Kamala just cackles. That's her fault line. Kamala just cackles. Other guy lies. Everything I say is a lie. The song, everything I say is a lie. Everything I say is a lie. That's gonna happen in this video. I tells you what.
My chest.
But this is a hellish essay, but it's sublime.
It was a queer feeling. Queer, I mean, because of their intense interest in learning their job, together with a seeming lack of any perception that the patients were human beings.
Oh.
It is strange to relate, but sometimes, as some young student stepped forward to take his turn at manipulating you, He would actually be tremulous with excitement, like a boy who has at last got his hands on some expensive piece of machinery. And then ear after...
They used you, like they used the rest of us as pupils to make us productive.
Ears of young men...
But this was much worse, I admit it.
Girls, of Negroes, pressed against your back.
God,
Relays of fingers.
George, why did you have to do that?
Solemnly but...
Why does it matter? Why does it matter? Why did it have to matter for you?
Relays of fingers solemnly...
That was before. It was a different time. So it's not as bad, because it was a different time. Now, I'm not even allowed to play it in a video without getting in trouble. You know? This didn't get in trouble. I better not get in trouble. It was the softer one, but even the softer one is really bad, because it's a slur. And we can't take back the 90s comedic Overton window. No, we have too many foreigners for that.
And not from any one of them did you get a word of conversation or a look direct in your face. As a non-paying patient in the uniform nightshirt, you were primarily a specimen, a thing I did not resent but could never quite get used to.
But aren't we all just specimen?
After some days, I grew well enough to sit up and study the surroundings.
We're just these specimen, but then we're also creatures of vanity, so we can't let go of it. Specimen, but can't admit it, for we have to be creatures of vanity.
Patience. The stuffy room
and
with its narrow beds so close together
erudition.
You touch your neighbor's hand.
We have to be creatures of vanity and erudition.
Every sort of disease in it, except, I suppose...
And hopefully genius. Hey, look, the news is still irresistible. I'm all kinds of delayed on this, so I can't spend that much time on the news, but look, the news is still irresistible. Trump orders Justice Department to investigate Democrats' top fundraising platform. Are you like me? Are you surprised there hasn't been, arrests of the big hitters on Team Blue? Because what's the comeuppance, right? Bigger protests if he arrests some of the well-known figures on Team Blue or just disappears them? What's the comeuppance? Just bigger protests, but he likes that, Then he gets to do what he wanted to do in, the Summer of Love. He gets to have the National Guard come and, shoot them in the knees. So yeah, I'm just surprised he hasn't, it's just the news. It's the sort of news you'd expect. It's really bad. But at the same time, it's like, he hasn't arrested the heavy hitters. And I just don't get why. Yes, there's going to be bigger protests if he does that. If he arrests AOC or something. But then it's just ever more exciting. He's in it to excite his will. His will is prone to excitement. But anyway, I'm just going to turn this into a short static segment. I'm not even going to commentate much on this. I'm just going to point out, the Bill Maher controversy. I haven't seen anyone say, that man's lucky. That man is lucky. He's not in El Salvador right now. Bill went and dined with him. But Bill, given everything that's going on, you're lucky you're not in El Salvador, Bill. Now, when the worst imaginable stuff that happens is not intended by anyone, it's not a product of intent or agency, social engineering, it's just a natural order. It's how the cookie crumbles. Whatever, lightning strikes or earthquakes or hurricanes, tornadoes. Hey, Schop. When it's just unintended by everyone, people say it's tragic, it's unfortunate, but it doesn't really get axiological because there's no moral crime. So it doesn't get axiological. But Schop here shows what happens when, psychopaths have children. Schop's about to show what happens when psychopaths have children. So some of the most unimaginable, axiologically worse stuff happens. But then also it's a moral crime. Now, what do the Natalists have to say to that? Imagine having your position be something where, yes, but all things considered, it's good that it happened as just a package deal. Because had it not been a package deal, then there'd be no things happening. And that's frightening when there's no things happening. So even though this is kind of worst axiological stuff, but then also there's a moral crime. Schop explains, he doesn't use the term psychopaths, but this is when two psychopaths have kids. But then it's like, it's more than two. It's just when a psychopathic couple has kids, what power such a couple has over another individual. What absolute dominion. And they're psychopaths. And they can't be stopped. Natalists know there's a lot of psychopaths in this world. Even the most humanitarian natalists understand there's a lot of psychopaths. You're not going to stop them from getting to know each other. You're not going to stop them from having absolute dominion over the kids they go on to have. It's part of your package. It's not a part of my package. I'm not afraid of no things happening. This is your baggage. So Schop's going to explain, in these records, what certain psychopaths who had children did.
Devilish cruelty with which the Portuguese in Mozambique treat their slaves.
Okay, right after this.
But we need not go for examples to the New World, that obverse side of our planet. In the year 1848, it was brought to life that in England, not in one, but apparently in 100 cases within a brief period, a husband had poisoned his wife, or vice versa. Or both had joined in poisoning their children, or in torturing them slowly to death, by starving and ill-treating them, with no other object than to get the money for burying them, which they had insured in the burial clubs against their death. For this purpose, a child was often insured in several, even in as many as 20 clubs at once.
There we go.
Details of this character belong, indeed, to the blackest pages in the criminal records of humanity. But, when all is said, it is the...
When all is said, the natalists are happy we're in the position we're in. They're happy about the history of the world compared to the history of the world being no things happening. They're happy about this when compared to that. They have to be.
Word and innate character of...
lest they stop being natalists.
Man.
You have to be comparatively happy with history and everything it contains when the alternative is no things happening across all time.
This God par excellence.
But, time is a form and limitation of our intellect anyway, as is space and causality itself. So also it gets kind of mind-fucky because he wants to be an idealist at the end of the day. So it also gets really mind-fucky because, yes, there's pathos and he puts pathos on everything. He puts it really well in terms of his prose and pathos. But at the end of the day, it's like, it's a dream. It's a dream. Unless it's the thing in itself, it's comparable to dream. There's no thick difference between, in his philosophy, his ideal pessimism, or whatever, pessimistic idealism, there's less of a difference. There's more of a fluidity between our dreaming and waking states than there is between the phenomena and the thing in itself. Like Schop, you were a daredevil. You were a daring one, epistemically. But then it's like, listen to the end of... on the standpoint of idealism, when he has that dialogue between matter and the subject. It's like one relies on the other. Show how he's wrong. Anyone, show how he's wrong. That dialogue he ends that chapter with. On the standpoint of idealism, there's just this masterful dialogue between the matter and subject. And they're both negging each other at the start about the other one being like clueless about what is original or eternal. And he's like, the matter position is kind of stupid. But, there is a thing in itself, and it's just, we can't perceive it because of the limitations of our intellect. Because it's just the brain. It's organic. It's not the primal thing. It's there to assist the primal thing. So we can scheme our way into survival. We have the brain so we can scheme our way into survival, long-term species survival, not so that, we uncover all veils and see into the depths of ultimate reality. We do not see into the depths of the ultimate reality. And I'm like, you know what? Yeah. Who's stupid enough to still think we perceive objects exactly as they are? Who's stupid enough to think that? We perceive objects exactly as they are. It's like, we know there's space between our eyes, right? We know there's, skin and, bones between our eyes. And yet we have the univision. We have the single vision. We know we don't see what dogs see. We know even human to human. Some humans saw that that dress was blue and the others saw that it was some other color, white or beige or something, like back in 2016. Individually, within the race, there's variability. So it's like we don't perceive objects exactly as they are. So you kind of gotta take idealism seriously.
Excellence of the pantheists, from which they and everything
But
like
yeah, those British
proceed.
couples, those British
In
couples.
every man there dwells, first and foremost, a colossal egoism, which breaks the bounds of right and justice with the greatest freedom,
But do we want
as
to?
everyday life shows
Let's
on a
just-
small scale.
Let's just.
But apparently, in 100 cases within a brief period, a husband had poisoned his wife, or vice versa,
Whatever, they got into it.
or both had
But-
joined in poisoning their children, or in torturing them slowly to death by starving and ill-treating them, with no other object than to get the money for burying them.
There's no paradise you're gonna construct or walk into. It's gonna correct for that.
They had insured in the burial clubs against their death.
Those kids.
For this purpose, a child was often insured in several, even in as many as 20 clubs at once. Details of this character belong, indeed, to the blackest pages in the criminal records of humanity. But, when all is said, it is the inward and innate character of man, this god par excellence of the pantheists, from which they and
There's nothing wrong with being indignant about that. Those psychopaths who starve their kids to death, indignant to the point where you say nay, right? There was Nietzsche wants to make it about you, at least whatever, 1880s Nietzsche, and it's about you. It's like, no, it's not about me, Nietzsche's. I'm going to say nay to life. I'm not going to affirm ultimately, and I'm sure as hell not going to do this amor fati shit when that happened. It's the worst imaginable thing, plus it was a moral crime. You're not going to turn that around. You're not going to correct for that. And you sure as hell shouldn't amor fati when facts like that are the case. So it's not about me, but Nietzsche is also beautiful. We're going to play from Nietzsche. Nietzsche gets beautiful before the 1880s. But, at the end of the day, it's not about me. It's about those kids. Those kids were wronged. Unspeakably. You can't convey how wrong it was. The word wrong it's not good enough. But then Schop gets ideal about it. No, but back to Bill Maher. I didn't see the stupid Larry David skit where he mocked him for dining with Trump, but apparently it was just kind of this Trump-Hitler comparison. And so Bill, as per the Larry David skit, Bill is the guy who sits at the table with the fascists, and so thus that makes Bill also a fascist. They're doing that. What do you see? One guy sitting at a table with 3 fascists. What do you see? Oh, you see 4 fascists. But then, by that light, Zelensky was a fascist when he sat across Vance and Trump, right? So you can't. Sometimes you got to sit across the table with fascists or whatever, reactionaries, because you need something from them. You need something from them because they inherited what the previous administration, the non-fascist administration, had, and that is power. So see, in America, non-fascist administrations leave behind a lot of power for fascist administrations, which are voted for by the people. 77 plus million people, and no shortage of evidence that, it's kind of fashy vibes. He said it. He said, poisoning the blood of our country. He said all sorts of stuff, and then 77 million vote for him. But then it's like, if you sit across the table with them, it's not just like one guy and 3 fascists. No, we might as well say it's 4 fascists because you're sitting at a table with them and discussing things with them politely. And so Bill doesn't deserve any reprieve from the fascist comparison. Bill is of the fascists because he wants to be courteous with the fascists. But it's like Zelensky did it too. But none of you guys called him a fascist for sitting across the table with fascists. Make it make sense, Bill. Now, see, they would say Zelensky had a job to do. Zelensky had a job to do. Well, that's exactly what Bill felt he was doing. Bill was stupid. You didn't have a job to do, but he genuinely convinced himself he had a job to do. Because Bill's one of these people who thinks, like, if you sit down and talk to someone IRL, like, they'll be a lot better than they are online. Because Bill doesn't read Schop. Schop figured this one out. It is precisely in trifles that a man shows what he's made of. So online, it is precisely in trifles that a man shows what he's made of. Because then he lets his guard down. Then he lets his guard down. You know, where he has to be all eyes and ears in terms of threats when he's, you know, IRL. So no, talking with people and that personal hand touch, it doesn't change anything, Bill, but Bill thought it changed something, so he went and dined with Trump, thinking that, you know, Trump doesn't just play to whatever crowd is in front of him. But then Bill was insulted by Larry David's, what did Bill say? Said it's insensitive, kind of insulting to what? The 6 million dead Jews. Yeah, this is how I often get my news. I won't click. I don't want to feed the clicky thing, not Vanity Fair, so I just get kind of the full headline here. It's insulting to 6 million dead Jews. It's okay, Bill. They won't know a thing about it. But yeah, Bill Maher was not a bad guy for dining with Trump. Bill was just really imprudent, and that's kind of the skit. That should be the skits. Bill is man who doesn't realize how close he came. He came within a whim. You came within a whim. You're getting your ass sent to El Salvador. And yeah, Larry David's stupid. Oh, the Pope thing. That's my coverage. That's all it deserves. Is the Pope thing. Kind of flex some irreverence your way, and I'll move on. You know, what's there to say? Why is there even a Pope thing? It's the current year. Much of the world cares about there being a Pope thing. And yeah, every now and then the Pope thing's going to die. What are you going to do? It just happened. But, you know, I'm not going to be timely about it. Screw it. The Pope doesn't deserve me being timely about him. You know, I'll be somewhat topical, but non-timely, as I will vent about later. But, you know, it just happened. And it's the Pope thing. So just a little bit of irreverence from me over the Pope thing. See what else is going on. Yeah, it's going to happen. They're just going to crow. They're just going to keep croaking because they can't do it when they're young, right? Has there ever been a young one? Yeah, there's been a lot of, you know, rejuvenation in Catholicism. They're all courteous and stuff. And I'm like, oh, if you just clicked on any of my videos, bud. But elsewhere, they respond to me, and it's a courteous enough discourse. And it's like, oh, if you just... But then oddly, you know, I've got this going on too. But, you know, we'll get to that later. Well, subsequent videos. But let's see what else is going on. Pac-Man is all crap. Crisis of Democracy. It's been here. It's been here, Dispatch. This guy's the biggest Simpsons nerd. Just all Simpsons videos all the time. It's like, come on, bud. You gotta diversify. Tim was insulting. Tim was... You know, I've never seen anything from this guy, but somehow... Not one video. I'm pretty sure not one freaking video. But somehow it keeps showing up. You know, I guess because I myself am somewhat outraged by life. But it's all this stuff, you know. Tell me something I don't know. Every video is kind of no. I'm going to tell you something you do know. Oh, come on, bud. Tell me something I don't know. Yeah, we have to pay just to live. It disrupts our genius because then we're time-bound. But, you know, some people say, oh, it's no big deal to be time-bound. Better to be time-bound than to be politically inclined. Parents love to brag about their kids. Yeah, tell me something I don't. See, it makes its way. Sometimes the agreeable make their way through the algorithm, but, like, not a single video title has got me the least bit curious to click on any of this. I was not made for this life, a drama queen. You know, no one was. It's just the will. It's just the will. He's a kid though, so I shouldn't go after the kids. It's good when the kids are on board. But God, give me one video title where it's like, tell me something I don't know.
He was born a simpleton, and a simpleton he will die.
But somehow it keeps showing up. Oh, because
Yes, because I myself.
no, I didn't see it. I subscribed somehow. I subscribed to Kid somehow.
Tell me something I don't know.
Yeah, I would like tell me something I don't know, but then I subbed and forgot about it.
No, I'm gonna tell you something.
Yeah,
you do know.
well,
Oh, come on, bud. Tell me something I don't.
No,
know.
he won't. Yeah, but it's okay because he's just a kid. But hang on, let's see. Should I unsub from Kid? Ugh. No, it's people outrage. You have to be outraged at people more, but he won't get it because people can seemingly do better. Hey, how's that? How's that for a hard determinist compatible statement? People can at least seemingly do better, whereas life can't do better. So why even be outraged at that which not even seemingly can do better? It's dumb to be outraged at that, which is just so seemingly only the mechanical part. At least we're seemingly able to do better because we're not all mechanical. And you know what? Well, maybe there just is a part of us that is part of idea that is non-mechanical and incorporeal. But soon coming up next, I say more things about incorporeal this and incorporeal that. But I just wanted to do a newsy thing. Pope just died, and it's good to be a reverend when these popes die. But some Catholics are nice, but many more are creepy because they just won't let up on the abortion stuff. Had debates with colleagues over abortion. It's just been backlogged. Just been stuck on the back burner. But Kid is like outraged at life, but no, Kid ought to get it. It's the people, feels like they can do better. But I'm not gonna unsub from the Kid. Just tell me what video of Kids should I click on? Hates just the idea of money, but it's exchanged. How else would we figure out what's what? And how else would this stupid turd south of the border, play games with our savings if it weren't for money? Yeah, just tell me why adulting has to be so complicated. It's because nation states have decided we're just going to continue being competitive forever. So they enroll you to be, to make you productive and industrious instead of wise and contemptuous. Yeah. So in the nation states' effort, because the nation states all vie for supremacy. So in their efforts to make their subjects essentially and trick them into thinking they're serving them through education. No, adulting is complicated because nation states are super competitive again. And so they want to make you productive and tie up your whole notion of what success is with how much you produce and what you accomplish as a member of commercial civilization. Because it is only through commercial civilization, through the goose that laid the golden egg, that they can build up their military. So they need their subjects to be enthusiastic and to have a completely misplaced notion of success. They need that shit. And whatever, I'm supposed to be impressed with the Pope for standing up for social justice, but the Pope will think, yeah, it should be complicated. Adulting should be complicated. Even the Catholics think so. Because the Catholics all are every bit as, chauvinistic in terms of their nation states. You gotta beat the other guys. So that's why adulting has to be so complicated. It's because you're a subject. You're a subject to forces that you can't even grasp you're a subject of. And, people call a number of things propaganda, but somehow they can't quite call education as the nation state's variant of propaganda. No. Education is lofty and aims to fulfill each individual. Here's one kid who seemingly, I don't think education taught him what he needed to learn. Education never taught him the pessimists, the cynics, none of that stuff. So he had to learn it on his own, even though I haven't clicked a single one of his videos. But, he learned it. I'm sure he learned what he learned online. Not by being on the honor roll. Ooh, the honor roll. Make you a better slave.
There's more of a fluidity between our dreaming and waking states than there is between the phenomena.
Fluidity is not the best word to use. That's just the word that landed. It's not the best word to use. It leaves it ambiguous. All I'm saying is that he says, and I think he ought to be taken seriously, is that in terms of, wanting to see into the ultimate reality of things, we never will. not anything like completely. We can get glimpses into ultimate reality. But it doesn't hinge on this, awake, asleep distinction, So that, in that sense, he would categorize dreams with our awakened states, insofar as during those awakened states, we fail to see the difference between the phenomena and the thing itself. And it is only when we perceive the thing in itself that we bring a glimpse of ultimate reality into light. But insofar as we think like the phenomena is the thing in itself, then we just might as well be asleep as well. I think that's what he's trying to say here.
In itself.
In the area of power,
Oh man, Irving Howe's Age of Conformity article just gets more and more relevant. Check this out.
But here a crucial distinction should be made. The danger of Stalinism may require temporary expedience in the area of power such as would have seemed compromising some years ago, but there is no reason, at least no good reason, why it should require compromise or conformity in the area of ideas.
See, and that's just exactly what the MAGAs can't get. When they, when something requires temporary expedience in the area of power for them, the same just does in the area of ideas. It's like, it would be nice if they knew they were full of shit. But they know not that they are full of shit. Because because the former is just so tethered to the latter. It's so clear. It's fluid. For the MAGAs, just like it was for the Stalinists.
No reason why it should lead us to become partisans of bourgeois.
Or at least people who,
heavily responsible for the
people who felt that if they enter into some sort of pact.
May require temporary expedience in the area of power such as.
So it was like Irving Howe said, like, even if worse comes to worse and we have to get into a pact with the Stalinists, that's because power, not because our ideas are Stalinist. But it's like, it's precisely what MAGAs can't get.
Such as would have seemed compromising some years
ago. The one just piggybacks on the other.
Why it should require
They're Siamese twins, or if we're in this century, conjoined twins. For MAGA, these expedients in the area of power, they just piggyback on the area of ideas. Ideas are power, right? As with the fascists, right? That's what the fascists couldn't get. Like, yes, there's stuff that's about power, and then there's the ideas. And fascists are like, we don't have a lofty bone in our body, so the one just is the other for us.
Responsible for the Stalinist victories.
It's the ideology of power.
In the United States
and conquest.
Liberalism is not only the dominant, but even the sole intellectual tradition. This sentence of Lionel Trilling's contains a sharp insight into the political life of contemporary America. If I understand him correctly, he is saying that our society is a present so free from those pressures of conflicting classes and interests which make for sharply defined ideologies, that liberalism colors, or perhaps the word should be, bleaches all political tendencies. It becomes a loose shelter, a poncho rather than a program. To call oneself a liberal, one doesn't really have to believe in anything.
Yeah, but that was still so much better than what's going on right now, right? Like, you can understand why Howe would be underwhelmed by America. This was written in 1954. You can understand this as a critique. Yes, you can totally see it. Just blandness because they're Soviets, so everything in America has to be bland and agreeable. You shan't step that out of line by the 50s. But it's like, yeah, I'd much rather go back to that.
Anything. In such a moment of social slackness, the more
51% voted flagrantly illiberally. We understand liberalism in political theory, not like Justin Trudeau liberalism. No, we understand liberalism as a set of priorities in political theory. Assembly is important. Expressive rights are important. Civic liberties are important, and more important than economic liberties. Civic liberties in the liberal tradition, most of the big heavy hitters will say, yes, economic liberties are important, but civil liberties are more important. No, 51% of America voted illiberally. I am over it, but it's just fun to rant about. But I am over it, I swear.
More extreme intellectual tendencies have a way.
But, all of this, yes, you can see how Howe would be justified in the 50s. But, I so wish we were back to this, where, illiberal was something where they could actually want to say, no, we're not illiberal. No, it's like MAGA will be like, yeah, I am. Fuck you. Right? Just like with the racist meme, right? The one calls the other racist. It's like, yeah, and fuck you. Yeah, that, but with illiberal.
Of sliding into and becoming barely distinguishable from the dominant liberalism.
You guys suck. You guys just have a weak temperament. You know, when you feel like things are slipping away, it's like, yeah, we'll betray liberal. We'll be illiberal. We'll be illiberal. You know, whatever. We'll slash the other guy's tires if we have to. We'll key their car. You know, we'll, loosen their brakes or whatever. Because we just got to win that bad. Yeah, fuck liberalism. You know, liberalism is just an attempt. It's a pack we get into to just have the net be as, stable as possible. You know, it doesn't mean the guy who's watching the game will not make some dodgy calls. But the one thing, for those of us who are fans of political liberalism, even though I think they have a problem with individuals like Dexter, I've said this numerous times, I'll say this again in the future, the philosophy of liberalism, insofar as it's morally tinged, like someone like Dexter has to be a moral monster. Dexter, who just had this bloodlust and insisted on targeting other psychopaths to satiate his bloodlust. He didn't ask for his bloodlust, but like in morally tinged political liberalism, it's not just like Dexter is a criminal and he ought to be imprisoned. I agree with that, even if he does some good by targeting all the monsters. No, but then they would also say, Dexter is morally problematic, and worse, what Dexter did is morally impermissible because we're liberals. It's about rule of law. I'm like, I agree with you legally. I don't know if I agree with you morally. You watch the show Dexter, he didn't ask to be the psychopath he was. Dexter had bloodlust. But he found all the right people that the system, your liberal system, couldn't keep locked up. So they were out on the loose. And they were going to kill. And very often Dexter killed them before they killed. Or did some other horrific shit. So I don't think Dexter's bad. Dexter didn't ask to have the bloodlust condition, and he found about as efficient a way to satiate it as you can muster. Dexter was talented as a psychopath. Like all those cops couldn't keep those monsters in jail, and the justices, the judges. So yeah, like liberalism has some problems, but despite those problems, illiberalism should still be worse than liberalism. In political philosophy, like we all have to understand, when you want illiberalism, it's like you're upset that the guy makes some dodgy calls who's watching the tennis match, the ref, the umpire, and so like, I'm gonna ruin the net so there can be no more net. I was like, at least the liberals will say we have to have the fucking net. Even though we can't stop dodgy calls. But, it's always better to have a net. And you fucking Trashcan wussies, you intellectual wussies who betray liberalism, you're just that fucking salty and ill-tempered and psychologically weak. 51% of you who voted illiberally.
Both conservatism and radicalism can retain.
But I am over it. It's just fun to rant about. I really am over it.
Intellectual recalcitrance, but neither is presently able to engage in a sustained practical politics of its own, which does not mean they will never be able to. The point is enforced by looking at the recent effort to affirm a conservative ideology. Russell Kirk, who makes this effort with some earnestness, can hardly avoid the eccentricity of appealing to Providence as a putative force in American politics.
Yeah, so that was the 50s. You say, okay, at least it was the 50s. But then it's like there's so much appeal to Providence. Even just on their podcast circuit, there's appeals to Providence. It's like, how do we ground everything? It's God. How do you think you've explained something by appealing to something even more complex and mysterious? Oh, it's not mysterious. You just gotta look deep enough. It's like, no. It's like you also need revelation.
Politics. An appeal that suggests both the intensity of his conservative desire and the desperation behind the intensity. Peter Viereck, a friskier sort of writer, calls himself a conservative, but surely this is nothing more than a mystifying pleasantry, for aside from the usual distinctions of temperament and talent, it is hard to see how his conservatism differs from the liberalism of Arthur Schlesinger, Jr. For Viereck, conservatism is a shuffling together of attractive formulas, without any effort to discover their relationship to deep actual clashes of interest. He fails, for example, even to consider that in America there is today neither opportunity nor need for conservatism, since the liberals do the necessary themselves, and that if an opportunity were to arise, conservatism could seize upon it only by acquiring a mass, perhaps reactionary dynamic, that is, by going into the streets. And that, surely, Viereck doesn't...
Maybe Viereck,
since it should be
but,
a rejection of industrial economy
just
and a yearning for
insert, instead of this Viereck character, insert your...
by going into the streets.
Insert your Gingrich, insert your The people who are playing ball, the erstwhile never Trumpers, insert them all. No, they'd rather go to the streets.
And that, surely, Virek doesn't want.
No.
If conservatism is taken to mean, as in
If
some
there's transgenderism, then we'll even plummet to reactionary lows. Even those who emphasized small L liberalism and minimal government will still plummet to reactionary lows because we just can't handle what's going on in the social realm. Because we're just that fucking gripped by the species. Yeah. Male SMV and the Lark. David Frum. What's the Frum? These are people with psychosexual hang-ups. The people with the psychosexual hang-ups are why America's plummeting into illiberalism. But, liberalism has flaws because it condemns Dexter, just morally. But maybe you can be a political liberal in a small L sense and not have it be morally tinged like I do.
classical sense it should be a
Hang on.
principled rejection of industrial
Classical conservatism.
If conservatism is taken to mean, as in some classical sense it should be, a principled rejection of industrial economy and a yearning for an order.
In the
Hierarchical
50s,
society that is not centered on the city, then conservatism in America is best defended by a group of literary men whose seriousness is proportionate to their recognition that such a politics is now utterly hopeless and, in any but a utopian sense, meaningless.
Yeah, but not if you watch those people from that Witness documentary. Like, that's exactly what they want. No, it has to be a rejection of industrial economy and a yearning for an ordered hierarchical society not centered on the city. They love their open spaces. They gotta admit, there were nice open spaces. It was just full of dogma. That was the problem. But yeah, you gotta love the nice open spaces. But hang on.
Such a conservatism, in America, goes back to Fenimore Cooper, who anticipates those implicit criticisms of our society which we honor in Faulkner, and in the hands of serious imaginative writers, but hardly in the hands of political writers obliged to deal with immediate relations of power, it can become a myth which, through abrasion, profoundly challenges modern experience.
As with the fascists, right? That's what the fascists couldn't get. Like,
Coming
yes,
up next on No Avail.
It's about power. And then there's the ideas. And fascists are like, we don't have a lofty bone in our bodies.
This doesn't mean the theme is done, because this is about political, and I don't explicitly say when psychopaths have children anymore. This doesn't mean the theme is done. It's political. It's very political. I'm talking fascies.
So the one just...
When do I ever want to talk fashy stuff? No, it's only because I have to. I get heebie-jeebies whenever I hear myself say Nazi or fascist or something. I'm doing it because I have to, and it's political, but the theme still applies. This is still about when psychopaths have children.
This is the other form.
When psychopaths have childs.
Responsible for
And,
idea.
I very much doubt they would only have the one child. They would have multiple childs to get more moolah if they have to, like the ones that Schop wrote about did.
Technology of power.
Yeah.
And
That-
conquest.
Yeah, conquest of Childrenz. That's why natalists. That's why they're natalists. They want their conquest of their own children's. Well, I'm here to tell you ain't gonna get away with it. At least not without my moral scorn. You're gonna get away with it. You should get away with it. It's your right to want to conquest your children's. It's just not your right to starve them to death like those psychopaths. But it's your right to conquest your children's. But, I'm here to say, morally speaking, there will be some scrutiny.
Oh man, Irving Howe's
The beginning.
Age of Conformity article
sent
just
it to
gets
the
more and
beginning.
more relevant.
Man, it's no wonder I get heebie-jeebies when I say fascism seriously. James, I think here they say it 61 times in 60 seconds or something like that. Let's do a count. It's like when South Park counted the amount of times they said shit in the first episode they were allowed to say shit on. I imagine there's like a fascist count in this segment. But they've said it a few times already, but, they're going to keep saying it.
The reason not to have a European army to fight fascism is
One.
because there might be fascists on our side at some point in the future.
Two.
into a fascist mass like this? Why would you join sides with a bunch of fascists? What's the matter with you?
But there aren't fascists in control in Germany. Many people would.
It will be soon, James.
No, but but Vladimir Putin does fit that description pretty much perfectly. And so the idea that you don't join forces. No, let me speak, mate. The idea that you don't join. It's all gone a bit category 1 already, hasn't it? But the idea that you don't join forces with your closest allies, your historical allies, because of a fear that they might become fascist in the future. At which point, of course, you could easily withdraw. But you don't join forces with them now to fight fascism.
7.
I have to finish the sentence, champ. You don't join forces
No, James, you don't.
with them now, people who aren't fascists, to fight actual
8.
fascists, because the people that aren't fascists might be
Wait,
fascists.
9. I lost track. I shouldn't do this sped up. It's like 10 times now, right?
Sure, and therefore joining forces with them now to fight fascists would make
11.
me stupid.
But there's a lot of fascists in there.
12.
Yeah.
A lot of fascists.
A lot of logic as well, Pat.
13, right? 13. I was like going to distract myself from something else, but I can't distract myself because it's 13 now, and I bet it'll just keep going. But yeah, something like, they managed to say fascist 61 times in 60 seconds. I swear it's empirical. It's empirical. I want to thumb up James. James cares for the right stuff, but I can't thumb up James if he says fascist. If his show, him and his callers say fascism more times than there is seconds.
Europe.
Yeah.
So he's gonna
But I'm going to ask you the same question again. Why would you not join forces with non-fascists to fight fascists? Because they might be fascists in the future.
You know your analogy about getting.
Just answer the question, will you?
Just
No,
answer.
no,
Yeah.
I
Callers
Go on, then.
won't. Callers don't want to listen to James.
Go on,
James,
then.
yes. You got to do what I do, James. No caller bullshit. It's all about you.
Don't say nice about me. Don't use your intellect.
But LBC wants there to be callers.
God forbid that I'd use my intellect to beat you down, Pad. But I think that's category 1, category 2, 0. Stu's in Plymouth. The pressure's on, Stu. What would be the problem with a European army?
Well, not fascism, but yeah, I'm all for a European army. It's just they're gonna have to work hard, be taxed a lot for it. But they want to keep their land. They want to keep their land free of the bear people. That's what it's going to have to take. But yeah, that's why I get heebie-jeebies saying fascism. It's because other people are clowns about it.
Into
The
1.8K followers.
Barron Trump allegations.
The shocking Barron Trump allegations just keep getting worse.
Shockier.
Story by Henry G.
Now,
R.
I read up until
6MO.
I saw that there were small animals involved, and I thought, you know what? I want to be as surprised as everyone else. And isn't it also fitting? Isn't it also fitting? But I want AI to read it.
6MO.
Oh, come on.
2-minute
AI,
read.
You're stalling us.
Yesterday, we learned that Barron Trump,
Yes, first
according
he
to an
slapped
insider,
the nanny.
Yesterday, we learned that Barron Trump,
Oh,
according to an
I can't
insider,
play it ahead.
allegedly
Look
slapped
at
the
this.
SH*T out of his nanny years ago. But apparently Barron's behavior is far worse than that. After one poster, who nannied for a kid who went to the same New York school as Barron after every DC school allegedly refused to take him, started dishing the dirt on the young psycho in training, even more stories started to come out about the youngest Trump. The more y'all annoy me, the more I'ma keep telling the Trump's business. Original poster at Wonderking 82, aka Mr. Weeks, promised Trump supporters in his replies. And boy, did he deliver. Soon after telling the story about the nanny, a few other damning details came to light, mostly about Barron's treatment of small animals. Your internet debrief.
Oh, stop.
Stay ahead of the most
Stupid
scandalous,
ads.
hilarious, and mind-boggling internet content.
I
delivered
know
directly
where
to
I
your inbox twice a
am.
week.
I know where I am.
Subscribe to
I
our
don't need to
newsletter
be
today.
told where I am.
According to Mr. Weeks, Barron has been showing the early signs of sociopathy for some time now. While hurting animals isn't always a sign of sociopathy, it's a pretty clear sign that something is deeply wrong with a child, especially if they don't show any remorse over their actions.
Yeah, you're worse than Dexter. As
Actions.
far as I'm concerned, you're worse than
Barron
Dexter.
Trump is already following in his father's gross footsteps, according to this intel. Not surprising, but scary.
Kid had
For
no
Barron,
chance.
the bad behavior allegedly didn't stop with animals.
Kid had no
He
chance.
also directed his abuse at other classmates, according to Mr. Weeks.
I don't mean because he was indoctrinated. I just mean genetically.
Weeks. The part about the inappropriate touching
When-
and investigation is especially disturbing.
When
And for the people in the
psychopaths
comments claiming that these are somehow signs of autism, that's not only incredibly
and
untrue,
own
it's irresponsible
children.
and harmful for individuals who are actually autistic. Folks on the autism spectrum don't tend to harm animals or classmates, and it's a little bit ridiculous that this has to be said out loud. There are even people
the
in the replies trying to
autists are
find a
just
way to
getting
blame
it from
Barron's behavior
every
on
single
Hillary
corner.
Clinton.
The autists are
Good
just
luck with that.
being, they're
Whatever
more
the truth is about
marginalized than the
Barron Trump,
trans. But how often do you hear people
For now,
worrying
we're
about
going
the
to keep it focused on
autists
these
being
disturbing, utterly
marginalized?
unbelievable claims. Ad.
Wait, what?
Sponsored content.
Did they say it
More
was
for you.
unreliable?
CNN4H.
Did they say
Vance
it was
confronted by
unreliable?
protesters in Cincinnati while out with 3-year-old daughter.
So inappropriate touching.
Yesterday, we learned that Barron Trump, according to an
No, it
insider,
just took me up
allegedly
top. But
slapped
yeah,
the
it's,
SH
you know,
asterisk
it's-
T out of his nanny years ago.
If you were this
apparently
tall,
Barron's
if you were
behavior
this
is far worse
insanely
than that.
tall, as like
After
what,
one poster,
14
who
years
nannied for a kid
old?
who went to the same New
I
York
think he
school
got
as
this
Barron
tall
after
at
every school allegedly
14.
refused to take him.
How do you not torture animals?
A man's character, as my readers are aware, assuredly comes to him from his father. It is a narrow-minded and ridiculous thing not to consider whose son a man is.
Yeah.
Actually autistic. Folks on the autism spectrum don't tend to harm animals or classmates, and it's a little bit ridiculous that this has to be said out loud. There are even people
The
in the report trying to
autists are
find a
just
way
getting
to
it from
bring
every
them
single
on
corner.
board.
The autists are
Good luck
just
with
being... But this was recorded before a certain thing happened. They're more marginalized than the trans, but how often do you hear people worrying about the autists being marginalized? All the fucking time now! I guess all it took was RFK saying, you know, oh, they'll never learn to tie their shoelaces, and all of a sudden, you know, when the target's right, we'll go to bat for the autists. But this was before RFK. You know, we all kind of knew RFK hated the autists, but RFK went hog wild on it. And now it's like, yes, we would really care for the autists. But it was kind of makes my, you know, segment here seem like it's lacking that info. I'm not lacking that info in this segment. It was just before all the people started defending the autists. Autists too can be codependent and fooled by all manner of stupid stuff like romance and dates. Yes, autists too will date. Every single corner, the autists are just being more marginalized than the trans. Not any. Often do you hear people worrying about the autists being marginalized? All it took was RFK saying something a little mean, and probably a little true. But you know, you don't need romance autists. In fact, you can say autism is one way to disarm oneself against the propaganda of romance. But more on that in the future.
Once again, that nationalist feeling can be purely negative.
Oh man, I thought I came up with every single reason, you know, to question nationalism, but Orwell goes deeper, very granular. You know, even as an anti-nationalist fixated on a particular nation, you're doing something wrong, and he unveils it here. This is, if you've not read Notes on Nationalism, this is a must from him. Because even I thought I went as far as anyone could go, coming up with innovative ways to neg nationalism. It's like Orwell's come up with even more innovative ways to neg nationalism. It's like what Russia did to the Trotskyists. It made them into these inverted, you know, they were fixated on Russia, Stalinist Russia. You know, whatever, they had their reasons, but it's like, I'm seeing parallels to what America's done to me. You know, I shouldn't have gone anti-nationalist in 2024 because of just how much hatred I had for America. I was fixated on America. I still am fixated on America. So to all of us, you know, of whom it can be said that we can't stop being fixated on America and we want to bring it to justice. We want to bring America to justice. I never thought I'd end up in this spot. This is kind of my sophomore YouTube years. Ooh, I wanted to bring America to justice. And then I just cooled off. But now I want to bring America to justice again. But it's like, I'm among the still, I'm among the rabble. You have to descend to feel those feelings. You're not stolid enough like Orwell was. If you're fixated on America and you keep coming up with, half bogus justifications to keep doing anti-American content, it's like, what America did to you, like Stalinist Russia did to the Trotskyists. Orwell explains it brilliantly. The whole thing's brilliant. The whole thing is, I think it's his best work.
There are, for example, Trotskyists who can be purely negative.
Yeah,
It's also worth
it
emphasizing.
can be purely negative. It's like I've gone negative against the states.
Once again, that nationalist feel
all along the way, kind of pointing out like, well, states is ultimately a fiction, but it's like I'm so riveted by a fiction as negative affect. It's like it's too much and I can't stop. So to those of you who can't stop, you might have these more high-minded reasons. Oh, you're a journalist. You must be fixated on America. You're a journalist. Or whatever, you're a try-hard online journalist. You run a Substack. That's your excuse to be fixated on America. It's like we're all being duped out of our time here, if you're seeing clearly enough. I'm going to let Orwell run. All of us who are fixated, whatever our reasons, I'll admit it, Mine are psychological. I'm fixated on America because I'm in it for the psychic thrill. To bring America to justice is a kind of psychic thrill. You know, it can be justified objectively too, legally, objectively, don't get me wrong, but psychologically, I would experience a thrill if all the people in power right now ended up in The Hague. I would experience a psychological thrill. I'm just being honest. There's good guys, bad guys, because I'm an ape. So at the end of the day, there'll be good guys and bad guys, or whatever. You know, bad guys, but then like really, really, really bad guys, bad hombres. That's always going to happen. And when it's cloaked in nationalism, it's like you're being duped out of your time and you're cultivating bias, even as anti-bias. I got to do something about that.
Feeling can be purely negative.
It can be purely negative.
There are, for example, Trotskyists who have become simply the enemies of the USSR without developing a corresponding loyalty to any other unit.
Yeah, I'm not particularly loyal to Canada. I said some stuff in the heat of the moment, but you know, no, not if it interferes with me having leisure.
When one grasps
That's true. You know, all else being equal, you know, whatever, Canada pride, okay, it's great, have Canada pride. But at the end of the day, you know, if I can be Canadian less but have more leisure, I would pick that. All else being equal. I don't need Canada in my life. Canada's awesome, but I don't need Canada in my life. What I have is these, you know, I have these antipathies. I don't have sympathies as much as I have antipathies when it comes to a particular nation. And it's just swoon.
Implications of this, the nature of what I mean by nationalism becomes a good deal clearer.
It's like, yeah, it's true. All of us seeking justice, we're comparable to the fucking Trotskyists who wanted to bring Stalinist Russia, to heel.
A nationalist is one who thinks solely or mainly in terms of competitive prestige.
Yes.
He may be a positive or a negative nationalist. Yeah. That is, he may use his mental energy either in boosting or in denigrating, but at any rate, his thoughts always turn on victories, defeats, triumphs, and humiliations.
Yeah, you want America defeated and humiliated. You know, that's how bad its leadership is. You want it.
He sees history, especially contemporary history, as the endless rise and decline of great power units, and every event that happens seems to him a demonstration that his own side is on the upgrade and some hated rival on the downgrade. But finally, it is important not to confuse nationalism with mere worship of success. The nationalist does not go on the principle of simply ganging up with the strongest side. On the contrary, having picked his side, he persuades himself that it is the strongest, and is able to stick to his belief even when the facts are overwhelmingly against him.
Okay, I'm not that stupid, but a lot of people are. But I'm like, no one watching this is that stupid. But there's a lot of those types.
Nationalism is power hunger tempered by self-deception. Every nationalist is capable of the most flagrant dishonesty, but he is also, since he is conscious of serving something bigger...
There's lows toward which we do not fall, we do not plummet. But, you know, the stuff I said before does apply. We shouldn't be psychologically invested in any of this bullshit. I shouldn't care if Trump ends up in jail, but I do.
Bigger than himself, unshakably certain of being in the right. Now that I have given this lengthy definition, I think it will be admitted that the habit of mind I am talking about is widespread among the English intelligentsia, and more widespread there than among the mass of the people. For those who feel deeply about contemporary politics, certain topics have become so infected by considerations of prestige that a genuinely rational approach to them is almost impossible. Out of the hundreds of examples that one might choose, take this question. Which of the three great allies, the USSR, Britain, and the USA, has contributed most to the defeat of Germany? In theory, it should be possible to give a reasoned and perhaps even a conclusive answer to this question. In practice, however, the necessary calculations cannot be made, because anyone likely to bother his head about such a question would inevitably see it in terms of competitive prestige. He would therefore start by deciding in favor of Russia, Britain, or America, as the case may be, and only after this would begin searching for arguments that seem to support his case. And there are whole strings of kindred questions to which you can only get an honest answer from someone who is indifferent to the whole subject involved, and whose opinion on it is probably worthless in any case.
We'll finish it later.
Do you think that there's
Last time,
You can't play nice with stupid.
on No Avail,
whatever,
Not this kind of stupid. You can't play nice with the American kind of stupid.
standing up to these fuckers.
this time with visuals.
Doing it unapologetically, right? And not.
Dems could go callous, but even I said,
One
if I have to do that every
Nelson
single
over
day,
one
it's like, yeah, I'll be
after
an
the
asshole.
other.
But like, if I have to be an
But then there's
asshole,
also-
either face to face with
there's
someone
also-
every single day, or even just online,
Just
and there's a bunch of
psychopaths.
observers,
Right?
and it's all tense every single day.
They
you
like
know,
it.
I'd tap out after a few days.
Whereas I just
Who the
tap
fuck
out?
Would do that every single day? But see, but that's why the psychopaths trying.
Well,
it's precisely
come
the
on.
psychopaths who can withstand tension, because for them it's not even
Not
tension.
fair. What did she
You know.
justify?
To be at odds. It's just, I don't know. It's stick wanking.
Having to feel like, I think the one thing that he could have done is when Trump made fun of his wife, he could have punched him.
Oh, well, there you go, Tim. You too. You too. But that was last time on No Avail. But hang on. What? Well, no, what? I didn't do this for this. I just did it to point out that, you can't last among the psychopaths. But the psychopaths are why this barbarism thing's making a comeback. Is because we can't last on a daily basis. I'm sure all of us can humiliate a psychopath, once or twice or thrice a week. But like the psychopath will show up every single day looking for exactly one such encounter. And that's a problem. And so it's no mystery why, the barbarism thing never really goes away. We now have data comparing the attitudes and values of American voters with people around the world, and it turns out that Republicans align their values very closely with Russia and Turkey, and to a slightly lesser extent, to a slightly lesser degree, China. See? It's the social policy, stupid, because they're basic. Oh, Lord, but there's psychopaths everywhere. It's not just it's a bipartisan affair. But maybe I can sympathize a little here, but just a little, but it's a bipartisan affair. Oh, God, what did you do, Jordy? What did you do? You got all of Canada hating you. Half of Canada always loved you. Jordy, you got all of Canada hating you. What did you do? You groveled. You miscalculated because you work for the guy for the shekels. Imagine, if you will, a country so lacking in a moral compass that they will elect this piece of shit. That was a static thing from the last video. More kind of, relishing, more schadenfreude. All three are psychopaths. That's why that's there. A lot of people at work are psychopaths.
Because for them it's not even
Not
tension.
fair. What did she justify?
To be at odds. It's just, I don't know.
Oh, now I get it.
Having to feel like.
Now I get it. It's not someone referring to her and saying that she's doing it. It's her who penned the article. But the thing is really poorly structured. You don't see that it's her who penned the article. Usually when someone's name, the title, it's because they're accusing that person of doing the thing that's followed by the title. But instead of just putting her in the orange part, they put the author. I guess she penned it. That's the thing. She penned it. But I didn't get it when I was recording that. So, yes, it was her accusation. It wasn't an accusation made about her. But also, trigger warning. Trigger warning. Video contains glimpses of AOC. Trigger warning to some. Gosh, Bulwark, you're such vultures. Which Pete do you think they're talking about? It's Big H, but then Bulwark's all over it about, look, our, peers, we'll call them peers, journo peers. They have to do the impossible over there in MAGA land. We're not going to be gracious about it at all. We're going to be vulturous about it because we're the Bulwark, and it does well. It does well. It does really well to devote single videos to takedowns of individuals who more than fumble elsewhere. Because, they have to do the impossible. they have to make sense of it all. They have to make sense of the king and the king's will. But then it's like Bulwark is so vulturous about it. They're all over it. And it just happened. You know, the Big H, it just happened again. Big H just fumbled. Big H just fumbled. More on that later, because I don't have time in this video. This is a jam-packed video. But I've got some time for some scary images, you know. Halloween's 6 months away, but fuck it. Let's do some scary images. Oh no, I didn't line this up right. Hang on. I want to do some scary images. There we go. That's, you may have seen that. You definitely won't be seeing that. This is just kind of, you know, out of the blue. I figured I'd grace you with some scary images just out of the blue. But what was the last one? Yeah, it's such a scary, they're all just, but there's a pinkishness, there's a pinkish through line, is there not? You know. This is the song that was supposed to be the intermission for this video. I was going to play the James clip, Everything I Say Is a Lie, where I sing along to James O'Brien saying, everything's a lie. But I don't have time to do the whole magnificent graphic thing I wanted to do. I don't have time and the willpower. I'm neither the time nor the willpower. But it is the Trump song, and that's the comment I left. It had to be done. This is the Trump song. You go here and you watch it, and it's, yeah, imagine I did the whole intermission with graphics. I may at some point later, when I'm no longer employed and greedy for free time.
It's all lies. It's all lies. Everything he does is lies. Every single thing he says is lies. And
everything I say
to point
is
it out is to threaten the whole
everything
the whole infrastructure, the whole house of cards.
Is a lie. Well, no, let's do it. Let's go ahead and do it. I'm pretty sure I'm safe doing it, so why not do it? It's not like I can make the video short anyway, right? So let's bring James back. No graphics, but just kind of doing it on the fly. Just essentially polishing a turd here.
Well, it's all lies. It's all lies. Everything he does is lies. Every single thing he says.
Here we go.
It's all lies. Everything he does is lies. Every single thing he says is lies. And everything to point it out is to threaten the whole the whole house of cards.
Short-lived synth pop new way. There's no way I'm getting copyright stricken. No freaking way. But hang on, we gotta have James again.
Everything he does is lies. Every single thing he says is lies. And everything to point it out is to threaten the whole house of cards.
I've not had enough. I want more.
It's all lies. Everything he does is lies. Yeah. Every single thing he says is lies. And everything to point it out is to threaten the whole house of cards.
But I gotta make it go in the chorus. We need it during the chorus. Don't we, Ralph?
It's all lies. It's all lies. Everything he does is lies. Every single thing he says is lies. And everything to point it out is to threaten the whole house of cards.
Bone Symphony. Sympathy, Bone Symphony. But don't do the Bone Symphony. Good song, but no, let's not do any Bone in Symphony. But hey, you all better have dissolved. Because when they're dissolved, they tend to not copyright strike you. I don't care anymore. I don't care. I don't have time to care. I don't have time to care. And you shouldn't have done it. But whatever. I'm not going to watch it. You shouldn't have done it. But he couldn't help himself. Will over mind. Another will over mind victim. 3, 2, 1. It was a month ago. It was probably close to 2 months ago. Dang Dang Skippy. Dang Skippy. Dang Skippy. Why are the 80s? Why are the 80s so good when it comes to the underground stuff? I always thought 80s was just this commercial decade, but man, everything I say is a lie. Everything I say is a lie. Everything I say is a lie. Everything I say is a lie.
How much of our suffering is self-caused, you immediately see that we could just stop doing that. Right. I mean, so if most of human misery and inequality and conflict and violence is a matter of the stories that people are telling themselves and finding credible, and the fact that those stories are discordant, then you see that virtually all of human suffering and chaos is just tissue thin. I mean, it's a bad dream. It's just, thoughts that people are finding compelling, and they cease to find those thoughts.
That's what Schop says.
Not much has to change. Again, it's not a story of there being a sufficient number of bad people in the world to make life unlivable, right? It's almost never the case. The numbers of truly bad people, true psychopaths, true sadists, it's always tiny. Right? It's the tiniest rounding error on what is actually the case, which is you have psychologically normal,
listen to him,
unlivable, right? It's almost never the case. The numbers of truly bad people, true psychopaths, true sadists, it's always tiny, right? It's tiny,
it needs to be slowed down.
Right? It's almost never the case. The numbers of truly bad people,
slow.
True psychopaths, true sadists, it's always tiny.
Oh, I didn't know he was this good slowed down. No, Sam, there's
tiniest rounding error.
Tiny as D? I don't know about that. I think it's a lot bigger than D.
What is actually the case, which is you have psychologically normal, compassionate, otherwise good people ruled by bad ideas. And ideas that put them in explicit conflict with other human beings who have different ideas.
I think this whole, psychopath or not thing, I think we got to rethink the binary nature of it, Maybe there are a few 100% amoral, cold-blooded people, but there's a lot of people who are 99% of the way in, and then they feel pathos every now and then. But, just 1% of the time. Yeah, usually with their fam shit. That's effectively a psychopath. There's a lot more, Sam. You're coping again.
All of this, the
telling people don't cope, but you're in the spell. You're in the spell. You're spellbound by humanity.
Is right there on the surface.
It's far more than a few tiny. It's more than tiny number of people. Psychopaths, because they find each other and breed and perpetuate the amorality.
Human ingenuity can't solve.
Right.
In the end, it's just.
Will it be Yank ingenuity or Chinese ingenuity or Russian ingenuity or Iranian ingenuity? You think you know? Look at your compatriots, the tech bros. They went MAGA, and you think they're going to solve our problem? They went MAGA.
Unless...
That is why the ordinary man has no sense for general truths, and why the genius, on the contrary, overlooks and neglects what is individual. To the genius, the enforced occupation with the individual as such, which constitutes the stuff of practical life, is a burdensome drudgery.
Isn't it though?
The two main requirements for philosophizing are,
wait, what?
Firstly, the two main requirements for philosophizing are, firstly, to have the courage not to keep any question back, and secondly, to attain a clear consciousness of anything that goes without saying.
I pass both thresholds.
So as to comprehend it.
You pass both, you shan't pull anything back in terms of questions. And you got to be super lucid, and then you pass philosophically.
As a problem.
Hang on, let's hear him say it.
and secondly,
Yeah.
to attain a clear consciousness of anything that goes without saying,
Gotta be super lucid.
so as to comprehend it as a problem. Finally, the mind must, if it is really to philosophize, also be truly disengaged. It must prosecute no particular goal or aim, and thus be free from the enticement of will, but devote itself undividedly to the instruction which the perceptible world and its own consciousness imparts to it.
I don't think the Vienna Circle morons got that, you know. For them, it was all abstract concepts just were philosophy. Like perception was cheating.
The poet presents the imagination with images from life and human characters and situations.
Yeah, see, the poet's not a dull fellow like the Vienna Circle morons.
Sets them all in motion and leaves it to the beholder to let these images take his thoughts as far as his mental powers will permit. That is why he is able to engage men of the most differing capabilities, indeed fools and sages together. The philosopher, on the other hand, presents not life itself, but the finished thoughts which he has abstracted from it, and then demands that the reader should think precisely as, and precisely as far as, he himself thinks. That is why his public is so small. The poet can thus be compared with one who presents flowers, the philosopher with one who presents their essence. An odd and unworthy definition of philosophy, which, however, even Kant gives, is that it is a science composed only of concepts, for the entire property of a concept consists of nothing more
The Vienna Circle morons borrowed from Kant.
than what has been begged and borrowed from perceptual knowledge, which is the true and inexhaustible source of all insight.
It's when you perceive things.
So that a true philosophy
Not when you come up with schemata, but when you perceive things.
cannot be spun out of mere
Yeah,
abstract
hang on.
perceptual knowledge,
Kant sucks.
which is the true and inexhaustible source of all insight.
Yeah.
So that a true philosophy cannot be spun out of mere abstract concepts, but has to be founded on observation and experience, inner and outer. Nor will anything worthwhile be achieved in philosophy by synthesizing experiments with concepts such as have been performed so often in the past, but especially by the
Rabid dialecticians is how Nietzsche put them. They're rabid dialecticians, but they don't perceive things.
sophists of our own day.
Yeah, they're sophists. Like
synthesizing
logicism sophists.
with concepts such as have been performed so often.
Omni-constructivists. Everything's constructive. We're omni-constructivists. You're using language. You're a constructivist because you're using language. There is no knowledge.
The past, but especially by the sophists of our own day.
Yeah, constructivists.
And I mean by Fichte and Schelling, and even more offensively by Hegel,
and omni-nihilists.
in the field of ethics by Schleiermacher. Philosophy,
Omni-nihilists who want to give you grief over stuff. Can you believe the stupidity of the world I live in? You know, I can't contain an audience apart from these few know-nothings and others, you know, who are commendable, but then they're jaded beyond comprehension. They're nihilists who want to give you grief over stuff.
such as art and poetry, must have its source
And they really don't understand how clownish they look.
in perceptual comprehension of the world. Nor, however, much the head
Their shriveled, you know, worm-eaten fruit view of philosophy. That's how Nietzsche called humans, is these, you know, worm-eaten fruit. And this frickin' Vienna Circle bullshit is a worm-eaten fruit view of philosophy.
needs to remain on top. Ought it to be so cold-blooded a business?
Yeah,
that
hang
the
on.
whole
Let's Schop go without my interruptions.
And in the field of ethics by Schleiermacher.
Yeah, those people suck.
Philosophy, just as much as art and poetry, must have its source in perceptual comprehension of the world. Nor,
Perceive
however,
things.
much the head needs to remain on top. Ought it to be so cold-blooded a business that the whole man, heart and head, is not finally involved and affected through and through.
Yeah, you don't have to be Klingon to perceive things.
Philosophy is not algebra.
Yeah.
On the contrary, Vauvenargues was right when he said, Les grands pensées vient de cœur, which in English means great thoughts come from the heart. Mere subtlety may qualify you as a skeptic, but not as a philosopher.
Rabid dialectician.
On the other hand, skepticism is in philosophy what the opposition is in parliament.
It
is just as beneficial and
that.
indeed necessary.
Okay.
It rests.
Stupid rabid dialecticians are necessary, but, they're also really stupid.
It's everywhere on the fact that philosophy is not capable of producing the kind of evidence that mathematics produces.
Yeah, it's like some people find it really hard to cope henceforth, It's like, I accept that. What did he say?
Producing the kind...
Yeah, it cannot be as, evidentialist. Philosophy is not as evidentialist as other stuff.
Of evidence that mathematics produces.
Yeah, and some people just, from there on out, just find it too hard to cope.
A dictate of reason is the name we give to certain propositions which we hold true without investigation, and of which we think ourselves so firmly convinced that we should be incapable of seriously testing them, even if we wanted to, since we should then have to call them provisionally in doubt. We credit these propositions so completely because when we first begin to speak and to think, we continually had them recited to us, and they were thus implanted in us, so that the habit of thinking them is as old as the habit of thinking as such, and we can no longer separate the two. People never weary of reproaching metaphysics with the very small progress it has made, compared with the very great progress of the physical sciences.
Yeah, we had to compete with the Garden of Eden and Garden of Eden 1.
But what other science has been hampered at all times by having an antagonist ex officio, a public prosecutor, a king's champion in full armor against it?
Religion sucks.
Metaphysics will never put forth its full powers, so long as it is expected to accommodate itself to dogma.
Yeah, religion
The various
sucks.
religions have taken possession of the metaphysical tendency of mankind.
I still hate religion, like a whole lot.
Partly by paralyzing it.
Am I allowed to hate religion more than secular? Oh, no. I have to be a logicismist. And I can't hate religion more than secularism, because then I'm biased.
Imprinting their dogmas upon it in the earliest years.
Certain things are just so much more clearly dogmatic than others that show up on the political menu, The stuff that shows up on the political menu, certain things are just so much more clearly dogmatic and religious than others. And that means that you've got a choice to make here. You can make the better choice. Vote with a less religious coalition, because religion is always going to get you down the rabbit hole of dogma. The other side, you never know where it's going to go. There's choices to make here.
It's 2019, and he cares for his son who has autism and a hearing defect and is unable to communicate verbally. His family has had no contact with him since he was sent to the mega prison in El Salvador. This is inhuman. What we are doing to this person is inhuman.
Bingo.
We're treating him as a subhuman with no rights to advance some political agenda. We're taking him away from his disabled kid that he is caring for.
Well, no.
From the U.S. citizens that he lives with.
No slowing down, because this is not a gimmick segment.
Legally. Under a protected status. We're taking him away from them. And shackling him. And sending him possibly to die.
Yeah.
In a prison. In another country.
Yeah.
Flying him on some plane with maybe gang members. Who knows? Maybe there aren't even any gang members there. Like, honestly, this story hits, and I was wondering, which of the cases that we've been covering here at the Bulwark is the one where the government has admitted a mistake? None of them. It wasn't any of the 10 cases that Mother Jones reported on that we talked about in a different video. It's not the case of Andre. It's not the case of the Miami Herald's we covered. It's none of the existing cases. This is a totally different one that we had not yet heard of. He was not on this man, Abrego Garcia, was not even on the original manifest that the government put out. So we don't even really know who's in El Salvador. The fact that this government could say, essentially, oopsie, which is what Bukele tweeted when there was the judge's ruling.
So
essentially, oopsie, which is what Bukele tweeted.
Tim's about to say, you wouldn't send your worst enemy to one such gulag, but, speak for yourself, Tim. Speak for yourself.
Yeah, there was the judge's...
You're just...
Essentially, oopsie, which is what Bukele
You're just one of many. I'd oopsie you right back if I could, but... but Tim wouldn't. Tim still, Tim's still trying to be equitable. I'm past it.
You know, there was the judge's ruling that it was illegal to send these planes to El Salvador. And the judge put a stay on it. And then the planes already went to El Salvador. And Bukele put oopsie. That's basically what this government is saying right now. Oopsie. We are going
Maybe Siberia more so than El Salvador. You know, as bad as El Salvador is, I think Siberia is worse.
to take the husband and father of an American citizen who is here legally. We're going to shackle him. We're going to put him on a plane. We're going to send him to San Salvador. We're going to put him on a fucking bus to a prison for terrorists outside of San Salvador. We're going to fucking shave his head. We're going to slap him. We're going to beat him. We're going to make him live in filth. Make him live in conditions that you would not wish upon your worst enemy.
Except, you know, these folks who utilize crying face emojis, which are just annoying even without all the psychopathy that's going along with it. Crying face emoji is just stupid. You never cry. You never have literally tears flowing out of your face because you're crying that hard. You know, be a little more literal with your emojis. But also, you know, it's just the whole story's bad.
Your evilest foe. And we're going to make him do all that without any contact with his family, without any ability to appeal. We're going to say, no, you are stuck there. You are stuck in a fucking prison.
Yeah, I'm not
masked RoboCop, sadistic guards doing whatever they want to you. You have no rights,
psychopathic,
no ability to get a meal. You have nothing.
Yeah.
You are just at the mercy of evil, sadistic, fascist monsters now.
Yeah.
And we, America, is enabling that. This
monster embraces prison guard job. Yeah, that's a very often one reason you don't want to commit crimes just because, you know, monster embraces the prison gig.
Is absolutely appalling to a degree that I really can't even process. It is the worst nightmare that you could possibly imagine. We're inflicting this upon
a guy had a disabled kid.
His country to find freedom. A man who's just trying to parent his child with severe challenges. And we're not going to leave that child fatherless. This is the Family Values Party. Yeah. This is the party of free speech and freedom. These people are sick. Everyone who's involved with this is sick and demented. Yeah. And we need to bring this man home. We need to bring the rest of them home. And we need to put them in front of a judge like you do in a normal country. And I need you who are watching this to call your senators, call your representatives, and tell them that is what we demand from this. More on this.
If I was an American, even I would. I've never thought of doing any such thing, but even I would.
Subscribe to the feed. Appreciate it.
Yeah, do it. Do it now.
I want to talk about your favorite guy, Donald Trump. You've called him an ignoramus, an unhinged madman, a lunatic. You said he suffered from psychological disturbances, campaign on a platform of fascism. What's your response to folks, and I know you get this a lot, who say those are symptoms of so-called Trump derangement syndrome?
No, it's not. TDS, it's damn Skippy. And people will say, oh, it's not because he's committed all these crimes.
But what are the crimes?
Psychological disturbances.
Yeah, that's the biggest crimes.
What's your response to folks?
It's the crime of psychological disturbance.
Campaign on a platform of fascism.
Making the public suffer one's own psychological disturbances.
Psychological disturbances. Campaign on a platform of fascism. What's your response to folks, and I know you get this a lot, who say those are symptoms of the so-called Trump derangement syndrome?
Well, this is the game they play, is he can rack up any number of crimes, and people will say, oh, it's not because he's committed all these crimes, it's because the police system and the justice system is out to get him. Or he can have any number of vices and virtually no virtues, and if you catalog them, then it's not the enormity of his malignance, it's that you've got something against him, you've got some bias against him. If people are determined to believe that, I can't do anything with that. All you can do is use your eyes and ears. Pay attention to the volume of utterly crazy things he says each and every single day. The volume of utterly crazy policies and adventures that he set the government of the United States on, you know, annexing Greenland, annexing Canada. I mean, what happens is, and we all fall into the trap, no matter how critical we are of him, is he gets graded on his own eternally sliding curve. His own behavior gets steadily worse. But unless it gets worse faster than we expect it to get worse, then he still winds up getting the benefit of the doubt. He still winds up getting this volume discount where any one of the things he does per day would have ended anybody else's career. Literally. Like any one of the things that he's done over the last 100 days would have ended anybody else's career. He does 10 of them a day and nothing happens because it gets sort of priced in. So yeah, if you're determined to just ignore all that, if you're basically proceeding from bad faith, then yeah, you're going to say, oh, Trump derangement syndrome. I can't do anything about that. They can say whatever they like.
Neither can the world.
You know, raise concerns about trust around Putin.
Yeah.
Brought forward the idea that maybe you should impose sanctions if the Russians screw us again.
Yeah, I mean,
what do you make of that criticism that, you know?
Yeah, well,
stuff isn't helpful.
It's a difference between what a columnist does and what a prime minister does. So no, probably a prime minister shouldn't be going out and saying that this guy's a lunatic and a criminal, etc. But that's not my job.
Yeah.
A prime minister, you do whatever works. So some combination of pugnacity and emollients and the judgment call is how you do the mix. What you want to convey is that you're not a pushover. What you want to convey is you're not going to reward him for bullying you. Because he's always going to try. So you've got to have some bottom lines. You've got to have some backbone. You've got to be willing to call him out.
Red line, yeah.
That's right. And you've got to be willing to call him out in public if you have to, or in private if you have to, whatever you think will work the best. If you're skilled enough to combine that with whatever it is that appeals to him, and he's such a strange individual that it could be anything. One of the things, for example, is he seems to have a weak spot for royalty. So, because they're celebrities, because they're on TV.
There's gold plating and there's palaces.
One of the ways to
look
at Trump is as a kind of malignant Chancey the Gardener, if you remember being there. That he is absolutely entranced by TV. Look at all the people in his cabinet who are from Fox News. Look at how many times he talks about somebody being from central casting because they look like what he wants them to look like.
Fraudster was Lucas.
I think part of the reason he might have one
Fraudster was deeply Lucas.
Seemed to get along with Carney in their first call is Carney looks like he's from central casting of
and Trudeau didn't come
inverted Lucas alliances
of serious dude, central banker. Who knows? But I'm telling you, with Trump, visuals and performance and TV
Spectacle.
Are just a huge part of it. This is his life. Somebody who
lies
got
that in common with his own coalition. Their power of sight predominates over their power of thought. But how did it look?
Constantly, is somebody who I think, and I'm not the only one to say this.
What is it? Dame paints her leverage, but also Fraudster paints what he imagines to be his leverage, but it doesn't work the way it works for Dame. It's just, inspires tired orange jokes that even I've indulged in. But, Dame paints her leverage, and heaven help him, he thinks he paints his leverage.
Does not actually distinguish between truth and falsehood. He is living in a kind of fantasy world.
Between what looks and doesn't look good.
Take over Canada. A fantasy world. A fantasy world where they can...
The lookist fantasist.
Or Greenland, for example.
In that sense, he is kind of like Dame.
So if you're the leader,
I guess Dame is her own worst lookist.
Deal with them.
Whereas he's just outwardly lookist, and he doesn't get how he's painting a target on himself by trying to paint his leverage the way Dame does. As a man, you just don't try to paint your leverage. What's wrong with you?
That's good intelligence to kind of work through. I think the fact that the president of Finland is a good golfer is clearly an asset, right? That would impress Trump. Because he made a point of mentioning.
I wonder if he practiced beforehand to get his skills.
Who knows? And
I guess he's too old to do regular sports. But even when he was young, he preferred golf to all the other sports. He preferred golf.
If he practiced beforehand to get
he
his
preferred. Oh, sorry, I'm slouched. I'm half asleep here, folks. But he preferred golf to all other sports. What else do you need to know? What else do you need to know? The man's a dullard. Is to prefer golf.
Because he made a point.
Even in his youth, the man who even in his youth preferred golf, because he has a stupid theory of energy. There's a finite amount of energy each man has, and you best not expend it all early on in life. That's why he preferred golf. That's how stupid he is.
Just beforehand to get his skills.
All right.
Who knows? And that would be very smart.
I think it's
but
time for me to pass out already.
And no doubt Trump is going to drop a bunch of other bombs during the course of this campaign. So we're conducting this campaign.
Say it again,
drop
slower.
A bunch of other bombs during
this
campaign. So
just one more time. I want to hear you say it slower.
Trump is going to drop a bunch of other bombs.
Say it ain't
Say
it ain't so, ultimate square Canadian man. Say it ain't so, ultimate square Canadian man.
So,
but man with good memory, it must be said, man with good memory and acumen on certain political matters. but ultimately, ultimate square Canadian man. Kind of hack man for the Conservative Party.
We're conducting.
Okay, but everyone understands. Everyone understands in Canada.
Fishbowl with the rest of the world kind of looking in, and some of the world,
people are
including
scared.
the Russians and the Chinese, etc., trying to interfere with it as well.
He's
that's
granted.
why
No, he's not a hack. He's granted. He said, cons have been caught flat-footed by the Trump phenomenon. Canadian cons.
I genuinely,
because they wanted to do the MAGA light thing, which ought to be condemned. MAGA light anything ought to be condemned.
Particularly in this case.
So he said they were caught flat-footed. The libs have met the moment. Carney, just the infinite irony themed name Carney. Carney's got a bit of an edge.
We're getting a real sense of the leaders.
Where's Sean Speer? I want Sean Speer.
Looking at Mark Carney, he was former governor of the Bank of Canada, as was your father, James Coyne, from 1955 to 1961. Have we learned anything about how good or bad former central bankers are at?
I'm sure that I'd be twice as rich if I just understood financial markets, but it's like, fuck financial markets. No, I finally caught it. I caught what it is. It reminds me of Rith Randell. Whatever happened to poor Rith? Reminds me of Rith Randell, of Cardinal Virtues fame, dead ringer. I was like, what is it? I was like, it's Rith Randell resurfaced, or at least doppelganger.
Politics at being prime minister.
It's kind of got the voice.
Well,
too.
first of all,
Rith Randell.
Former central bankers are at politics at being
old
prime
school YouTubers will know Rith Randell, the man who had one or two or more nervous breakdowns per week.
Well, I generally don't.
Half of which were on camera.
Have we learned?
Yeah, it's Rith Randell, the guy who had one or two or more nervous breakdowns per week, and half of them were on camera.
Former central bankers are at politics.
It's Rith Randell, and then he was Me Too before Me Too. Yeah.
I generally don't.
He wanted to be Rith Randell as the sensitive guy who wanted to be, guardian of the dames, and then he got Me Too.
Well, first,
even before Me Too, and called a creeper and retreated.
First of all, I
into oblivion.
Think central
but motherfucker wrote a mean script. Rith Randell, motherfucker wrote a mean script. But now his doppelganger is interviewing
how
ultimate square Canadian man.
Good or bad, former central bankers are at politics at being prime minister.
First of all,
I don't want to understand that world, but you're going to work more. You're going to work hard a lot more if you don't understand financial markets and all that, devilish info. I shan't devote mental energy to devilish info.
I generally don't think central bankers should go into politics, and I worry about this.
I haven't taken care of certain stuff. No, you didn't see that. No, another censored box. You didn't see that.
You're setting yourself up for your future political career.
Rith.
So I hope this is not.
I miss you, Rith. I miss you. I miss your mean scripts.
The idea of it.
Sorry you felt you had to be a guardian of the dames. Sorry the dames did that to you. Sorry the dames did that to you.
They're kind of the opposite of politics.
I spy with my little eye where Rith has to live now. It's the place where Rith has to live now. It's where you go when you're on the retreat. The guy's on retreat so bad, I can't find a single image of him. Google images, you name it. All his various manifestations, usernames, I've tried. Not a single image. That's about as clean as a slate can be wiped. A guy was making videos for years. The bit only works if you can see how similar he looks to the other guy from the hub who's conducting the interview, but I can't. I can't find a single image of Rith Randell. That's some hard Me-Tooing. That's some next-level hard Me-Tooing. It's such hard Me-Tooing, I had to say, well, no. I had to say, well, no, to the dame who wants to choke out Trump. It's just they got rid of Rith too much. They got rid of Rith too hard. I can't even complete my bit by showing everyone who surely doesn't know who Rith is by showing everyone just how similar the two guys look. If you guys don't see how similar they look, the bit doesn't work. I can't find a single image of him. But that's okay, I'll keep the bit anyway, because I'm like that.
He's more than usually political for a central banker.
Let's turn to the other guy, Pierre Poilievre. A while back, and I was surprised by this. Tell me if you meant by this. You said, I never thought I'd be saying this, but the problem is that with Mr. Poilievre is that he just isn't ruthless enough. What do you mean?
Wild.
Well, I think he had an opportunity or a challenge
by the square man. Listen to that.
The problem is that with Mr. Poilievre is that he just isn't ruthless enough. What do you mean?
Well, I think he had an opportunity.
Just isn't ruthless. But the problem is that with Mr. Poilievre is that he just isn't ruthless enough. What do you mean?
Too square to get away with being that wild.
He had an opportunity or a challenge and an opportunity at the same time.
Better split up.
He needed, first of all, he needed to do this big pivot, which he's only now belatedly, half-heartedly doing.
So you agree the pivot is happening? You sir, are a pivot believer.
Yeah, it's happening slowly. He's kind of like about a week or two behind the curve. He's saying things now he should have said 2 weeks ago. But really, he should, again, having been the guy.
It's fun to just say things that, you're not even going to be asked to prove, 2 weeks ago.
Who saw the housing affordability thing.
It's been bad. It's been bad for months. Actually started talking about annexing Canada first in November, a couple of weeks after he won. So, and then it picked up gear December. So it's been... Pierre is late by months.
He should have seen the Trump thing coming and should have realized this is a death ray for me. That if I'm in any way associated with Trump, I'm going to be toast. So I need to get out in front and demonstrate how not Trump I am. And I need to be Captain Canada, anti-Trump, and I need to drop all of the Trumpisms that I've habitually dropped into my political discourse. So he's not Trump, but he has been willing to be Trumpy, and he appeals to a certain type of Trump-minded voter. And all of that was maybe working for him up until about 3 months ago, and really hasn't been working for him lately.
The northern chud.
America
more like Canada. No, 2025 now. No, it's about Canada today. Today's the day. Today's the day where Canada decides. Like literally, today's the day. And this video has to be redone because there's just so much. There's just so much that's about the election that I'm going to be late on.
Indecision. Yes. But no indecision here.
There's going to be some indecision because it's a Canadian-style election, unlike in the States.
Yeah,
and maybe the States needs to parliamentarize itself so that stuff that's as bad in the executive doesn't happen in the States. Wait, no, let's go back. It's not about white supremacy in Canada, as much as the Canadian progs want to convince you that there's white supremacy in Canada. No, it's just the problem is just 1/4 of Pierre's movement is MAGA. Like still to this day, 1/4 of his movement remains MAGA, and it's voting day. So whatever. People want to say the stakes are high. I'm on Blue Sky a lot, so there's a lot of Canadians also on Blue Sky, and they're treating this one as if it's as consequential as the one from November south of the border. And they're deluded.
For America.
No, Canada. But I'm so about trying to finish this video before the results are in so that the whole thing can make sense as an anticipatory thing that, I'm going to stay in. I'm not going to vote. I don't even know. I don't even know if my district swings Lib or Con. Usually I excuse myself from not voting by saying, the district swings one way or another, but I didn't even do that much research. I'm going to stay in and not vote because I got a video to do, and that's more important because it's ideal. No, not utopian political ideal. I mean, no, it's the ideal thing. From earlier in this video, from much, much, much earlier in this video. 5. But yeah, seriously, like so many Canadian progs and maybe other, people who consider themselves moderates, in the Canadian context think that the stakes are as high or nearly as high as they were in November for the Yankees. But that's just not true. Pierre's just a dick. But yeah, if I had to, I'd hold my nose and vote for Carney, even though, his name is Carney. And we should never vote for people whose name is the thing that's the kind of the con thing. As in con, Carney the con. All kinds of ironies here in Canada. But yeah, it's not as bad. It's nowhere near as bad. Pierre wouldn't be caught dead in a million years saying poisoning the blood of our people and other rhetorical hijinks. Because our cons are far more potty trained. Yeah, and see, I'm not losing it like I was losing it back in November. But God bless the Canadian election, and may the best man win, because that's how it goes. I guess Jagmeet is still thinking that he's accomplishing something by staying in the race. Talk about diluted optimism, right? These, third and fourth parties. Ooh, the Greens. These people who stay in the race. It's like the most glaring example of delusion that cannot be contained. These people who, it's going to be record levels of people who vote just two ways. It hasn't been this way in 70 years in Canada. People who are anticipated to vote either Lib or Con. And the Jagmeet guy is showing that, when optimism decides to be diluted, it stays diluted till the bitter end. But whatever, I'm sitting this out because I got a video to finish. But, may the best man win. And the stakes are nowhere near as high. And here's one more segment that's kind of about the election. But, it's Steve Paikin. It's Steve Paikin making his debut on this channel, I think. No, Steve Paikin was on this channel in 2022. Yeah, he was on this channel once before. But, let's just pretend he's making his debut. And here comes the brilliant and ever considerate Steve Paikin.
Am I reading between the lines accurately when it sounds like you are unimpressed so far with what you've heard from the major parties as it relates to specifics?
Well, I think it's more than I'm not surprised. It makes perfect sense for our political leaders to respond to our needs, and we aren't asking for how many...
downplay how bad it is.
Consulates are you going to close in the United States? Are you going to move them to another country? We're asking, will you make us feel confident that we will be in a good place if you are leading us into this unstable, insecure world?
Stephanie, what are you not hearing that you wish you were hearing from, let's just take the two major parties, which the polls would suggest are the two that have a shot to win this election. What do you wish you were hearing?
Be not afraid of She won't say it.
Right.
The other guy didn't say it.
To be fair to Adam, I agree. It's not surprising.
She especially won't say it. This chick, they're especially afraid of poverty and their profligate ways.
I think that we're not hearing these things. It's just, the academic in me
who even needs to buy this?
Slightly out of touch with the common...
academic?
The academic in me
even the academics can't stop.
Person in Canada
they can't help themselves.
What the price of fruit is going to be in 6 months from now. So what I would like to hear is not so much the specifics about closing consulates, to be fair, but, we have heard skepticism, particularly from the Conservative Party, regarding certain international institutions. And I don't see this in a politicized way. But, some international forums, skepticism, they take a more skeptical view towards the UN, towards groups like the World Economic Forum, almost certainly. So what is their idea for the right forums that we should be going to?
I guess I do some of that too. Fair enough.
Bacon, here's this retweet he sent. Here's what Joe Wilson said. War criminal Putin launched a ballistic missile at a hotel where American, UK, and Ukrainian aid and health volunteers were staying. 4 dead, over 30 injured. In his deliberate bombing of children's cancer hospitals, maternity wards, etc., Putin further confirms his cowardice and contempt for life, including the lives of the Russians he sends to die in his pointless war. Great tweet, but fucking do
Tim says it's not enough.
Something about it, like the ballistic
missile. Tim's right, by the way. It's just funny how he, had an outburst.
Tell where Americans...
Tim doesn't usually have outbursts.
Workers live because your president that you supported stopped giving intelligence aid to Ukraine. So fucking do something about it. Don't tweet. Call Donald Trump. Mention Donald Trump in the tweet. Like, what do you do? This is virtue signaling. This is the shit that Republicans and conservatives make fun of. That's all this is. This is virtue signaling.
That's the equivalent of holding up a little paddle.
It's worse than holding up a paddle.
Putin is bad.
Yeah. Putin is bad. Like, you don't even... At least if you held up the paddle when Donald Trump was in the room, it would have sent a message that he was speaking about Donald Trump. This is just an empty critique of Putin. Great. These guys just fucking boil my blood so much. So anyway, this is Talk this Friday. Any other thoughts? And you wrote about it.
I knew I started for some reason.
It's just fate. These guys just fucking boil my blood so much. So anyway,
scrubbing of everything that is to be a little more serious about this. It's Stalinist.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just kind of a Stalinist,
He speaks. He speaks on MAGA.
Thing in the memory
and
hole.
mump.
And I
throw everything in the memory hole.
Everything in the memory hole. And I say this
just because I compared him. Just earlier today I compared him to Stalin.
I mean, in a way,
because power just is ideas.
Especially as a longtime federal employee, to sit through a lot of these, a lot of the training and all the other stuff. I could have been a natural ally about too much DEI stuff. Right. You know what I mean? Like, I had to take a morning out of my life as a federal employee while a professor came in and tried to explain to people, like guys, I still remember there were guys like much older than me, sitting there nodding, trying to figure out. She's like going, okay, so this is what cis hetero means, and I'm like, oh, for Christ's sake, we really.
People in my workplace, it's a bureaucracy. It's a crowny bureaucracy. They weren't even compelled. They did it on their own volition. They put their pronouns in their SIGs, a lot of people. So it's unbearable, bottom up and top down too.
We have work to do today. Okay, I get it. You could say, look, we're not going to
unbearable and voguish.
Do that. We're not going to spend.
It's not, that I have the issue with it for those reasons, but it's just so voguish.
On that, but
morally showboaty.
Scrubbing the Defense Department archives to make sure that somebody who who's gay in a 1990 story or something gets vanished. I mean, it's panicky. It's like a gay panic almost.
Yeah, what is even the point of deleting? So what are they doing? They're just going through their website, control F-ing every page.
One satanic panic after another.
Control F trans. Control F queer. What are you doing? What is the point of that?
It's panicky. I mean, it's a weird kind of panic. And
it's so stupid. I think confirmation bias is one of the things this woke that it needs to scrub in terms of a word. I mentioned that.
I don't know what.
But even confirmation bias.
I mean, I understand.
Stop doing the programs. It's fine. I tried one of these things the other day, and it's like you're, it's like what if you're a guy and a new young woman comes in on the staff? Like are you supposed to say nice knockers, babe? Like yes, no, maybe. It's like no, that would be sexual harassment. It's just like
that's a red light. Right? The red, yellow, green.
Well, I think women they want to be scantily clad, and they want men to say nothing about it. It doesn't matter if you say something about it, but the rest of the men, they're not allowed to say anything about it. And on some level, the insistence to be scantily clad and at the same time for men to say nothing about it reveals their delight in dissimulation and concealment, both foundational on the face concealment and then also attitudinal, but especially they want concealment from the other side. Right? They thrive on dissimulation. They have an innate desire for dissimulation. It's why they must be scantily clad. But especially back in the early 2000s, everything was just so scantily clad in music.
It's like anybody that doesn't know this,
Democrats, getting more into fighting Trump, they really should ask, always take an effort to put it out there to say, fighting for working families, don't want to give tax cuts to plutocrats. Did you really vote to have Kash Patel run the FBI? Yes, in MAGA world, we know you did. But the voters we're talking to, did you really vote for that? Did you really vote to have the President of the United States publicly draw the link from autism to vaccines and put Bobby Kennedy in charge of NHS? Really? You have children. You vote. You voted for measles.
Psychopaths who have children and vote for measles. You'd have to be a psychopath or new age grifter or some kind of nutter.
Instead of saying, well,
more like RF gay.
Vision. Tim wants to talk about anything he wants to talk about, and I'm just gonna fucking rant about Peter Thiel and how he wants to steal Twink's blood for his weird vampiric techno-feudalist cult that he's running of HGH blonde
send post links that work for him at Palantir.
I love that.
And I'm just gonna rant about
HGH
that.
post
I don't
twinks.
care if we're gonna talk. I don't care if we're supposed to talk about visas.
Tim surprises.
I don't care.
But you're still getting the gay jokes. It's coming.
I'm trying to grind here during the prime time. Unlike
You're the grinder. He'll get you off. Little Easter egg there for people. Good start to the show.
Well, I'm trying to grind here during the prime time. Unlike
That's what I call directing. That's
get you off.
first class directing. That's why at the beginning of each video you see directed by No Avail. It's not just envisaged and delayed by No Avail. No, it's directed. Look at that.
Trying to grind.
Almost. A little too close in. But anyway, come on. These guys are likable, even though, yes. I think the baseball hats are just, whoever's like head honcho at Bulwark. I guess Bill Crystal. Just Americans like baseball and baseball caps, so just wear baseball caps as much as just short of arousing suspicion. So yeah, wear baseball caps 2/3 of the time, but not all the time, because then you'll arouse suspicion. Because we have to ingratiate ourselves to the American people, because it's really important. They start voting better. But despite all that, these guys are likable. Just listen to this. Yeah, come on. You just gotta slow him down. You just gotta slow him down.
Trying to grind here during the prime
and superimpose my sensibilities, and then they're all right. But much more critical content to come on the Bulwark, but not in this video, but later. Yeah, how do you not love him? And how do you not love my directing?
They're going to set the timeline right. You know what I mean? Like, if only we can go back to, 1989, the last time we had a real president, and say, okay, we're going to just scrub the time.
But he did the offshoring stuff.
So none of this
How is it okay?
All the gay and trans soldiers will go away, and everything will be okay again.
Had Reagan stayed in power, there would have been no gay and trans soldiers.
Just like when I was a kid in 1966.
Yeah. Two thoughts on that. One is just on the serious, we can make fun of stuff, but on the serious side, I haven't confirmed this, but there's no reason to believe it's not true. I received a note from a reader about, a couple of soldiers that they are aware of that have been kicked out, that were trained that because of gender dysphoria or whatever, people that had done nothing else. That is fucking outrageous. For
a draft dodging, makeup wearing, bone spurs capped TV stars.
Well done, Tim.
People that were voluntarily serving the military out for no.
How is it okay that he wears that much makeup? Why? It's so glaring. Lights or not, it's so glaring. He wears so much makeup. Of all the sins, that should be sin numero uno in terms of, what a man is and isn't supposed to do. But it's okay.
Reason. It's fucking outrageous and it's maddening. And your point on the embattled minority, it's funny. I was watching this video, this kind of viral video that was going around. It's a guy in a MAGA hat at Disney World. He's walking around. He's by himself at Disney World, and he looks. He's kind of a weird looking guy, and he's got his phone up, and he's videotaping everybody that walks by him, and people are giving him a look. And the point of this is this embattled minority thing. Look at me. I'm so brave. I went into the lion's den and wore this hat, and people are giving me weird looks. And it's kind of well, for starters, you guys won. So you have a majority of the people. Maybe not a majority of the country, or maybe a plurality, a bare plurality of the people. So there are going to be a lot of people that agree with you. And number two, maybe these people are fucking looking at you because you're at a children's park by yourself.
Filming
strangers. I think it might be your behavior, not your hat.
Right.
Maybe a little bit of both, I had a flu dream where Cash Patel sent jackbooted thugs into my home to arrest me. And as I was being taken out, and they went out there,
Delusions of grandeur, Tim.
I didn't see it, but in my dream they're going upstairs to my child's room. I went outside, and I was like, "What did I do?"
Child's room. God, even being gay doesn't stop him from being a natalist.
And they cited me shouting, "Kill him!" from the water boy. I was like,
two small potatoes, Tim.
And then like some weird people from my high school showed up, and then I woke up.
But they might go after you just for being gay, though, not because you're like on the bulwark. It's just because you're gay.
But with the Alien and Sedition Act, I'm wondering if that was maybe a premonition instead of a dream. Maybe it was.
It's a delusion of grandeur premonition. Or maybe you know, your dream knows it's because you're gay.
I don't think that it covers you, the Alien Sedition Act. Like, I'm not saying they're not coming
But you're in
for
the
you.
same boat as him, as we've established in the last video.
Yeah, but I think, like, correct me if I'm wrong, but I did look this up, because now we're trying to look things up before we
Only JVL is safe on that front.
I was trying to understand exactly, but this is what led people, it's used in wartime. It has only ever been used in wartime, like when we were actively at war with another country, and...
Well, it's about to happen. You guys are about to go hog wild on us.
Us to one of the most...
But I say bring it.
Where we were putting people in internment camps. The
Japanese. Disgraceful, according to who? Have you asked the Magas what they think
Something, eat a man's liver, yes.
Bring it.
Maybe not. Did you see the Jubilee thing where it was like Sam Sater was going up against a bunch of MAGAs and like a gay MAGA?
Those things are so awful.
And he's like, you act like all MAGAs are like against gay people. And he's like, none of us want to make it illegal to kiss for two men to kiss in the street. How many of you would want them to kiss two men in the street in like 6 feet? And he was like, wait, man.
Yeah, I wouldn't have raised my hand. You guys can kiss all you want, but it's still gross. Man, look at it go.
Kiss in the street? How many of you would want him to kiss two men in the street in like 6 feet?
I meant, well, no. I just have to emphasize because now I'm, even though it's late in the video, I meant the well, no part. You know, what did I say? It's just, you guys can kiss all you want, but it's still gross. But then you have to, just for those who are just watching, right? I meant what I said. I meant what's written down. I'm just pretending that it's gross. It's not gross. And even if some people think it's gross, at least they can probably admit it's just a bias. It's no more or less gross than heteronormative kissing. And I thought to do another one of the mashups here to kind of, this kind of further elucidates that there's no actual homophobia. I'm just having fun because it's late. I wouldn't have raised my hand. You guys can kiss all you want, but it's still gross. No, it's not. It's no. But then to have my, non-homophobic bona fides, the next thing here is just a little thing that's kind of, just a little shout out to my antinatal, to whoever's watching who's antinatal, who will vouch for me. I'm sure that no, I'm not. I can't be homophobic because I merge yet more graphics here. I merge yet more graphics because it's them. It's the them who do the thing. That's the bad thing. So Tim's off the hook, and we can only watch. Because, yeah, it's them who do the damage. It's the two of them. When they merge, they do the damage. And also, some point, I think early in the video, I said that even I ended up blindsiding myself by making these, Orange Man jokes. And so because the video is so long, I can't go back now. I can't go back to insert this graphic. But now that you've seen this graphic, just masterful, right? It can be appreciated no matter what you think of the Orange Man. It's just really good. But, if I had time, I'd go back and rewatch the video and insert this specific thing, which is brilliant in its own light, precisely when I said, even I blindsided myself by joining in on the Orange Man jokes. But I don't have time to insert it early on in the video because I don't have time to rewatch the video. Because it's even later now. It's even later. So just pretend that graphic was inserted in the video at that point.
The crash was becoming soon.
No, I did that too much. I'm not doing that again. No, it's this guy. It's explicit note. He leaves these explicit notes, but sometimes he manages to just be condescending, but sometimes he leaves these explicit insulting notes. So as of late, he's decided to be all fired up and insulting. I was like, oh, I miss the mere condescension. But okay, so this thing, this whatever, machine, this machine creature thing, this maybe AI, left a lot more typey type. And I'll get around to it in text, but, it's just, I really hate you for making me resurrect that fucking goddamn blog. And I really hate you for making me write so much. You've reminded me that I really hate my writing, you fucking asshole, because you did a lot of typey. If you care about anything, if you just care about anything, and it motivates you to act, and that action at some point consists of commentary, right? We can act by our ordinary human, all too human motivation. But sometimes such action consists in commentary, right? And so I guess to distill all his bullshit is that no, however you act, the genre of action known as commentary ought to be absolved from human, all too human motivations. Motivations like what I expose in this video about poverty, what I expose, the utter collapse of any hope of fair play, where it's like, you want to do politics with people who understand that I'd rather lose fairly than win unfairly, and dialogue kind of being grounded in that, and all the other stuff, all the other kind of, epistemic collapses in the public domain that I expose, and I see clearly as to which side is at fault more, which participants are at fault more for the utter collapse of any semblance of coherent public discourse mapping onto reality. And instead of just everyone being a partisan reacher, I point using examples of which side is guiltier. And that's one of my cardinal sins here. It's just even having any kind of values to be concerned with at all. But then how those values fuse into the whole collapse of public discourse thing. And his common denominator is not to complain about the collapse of the public discourse thing. It's not something he ever has to say. But that's how insane he is. He thinks it's wrong to be stirred by seeing the collapse of what used to at least resemble, a kind of factually informed public discourse, where the two, like one side wasn't comprised of election deniers. He's like, I'm going all kinds of wrong. That's how you distill it. I'm going all kinds of wrong by being hot and bothered politically, even in a context where he cannot deny that one side is election deniers in the sense that they voted for an election denier. Like, it doesn't matter how insane reality gets. You're just that insane yourself. You find it tolerable. You're just that jaded and jaded beyond comprehension, explicit not. You find it tolerable because you yourself are insane. Instead, I have to be a philosopher 100% of the time when I'm doing commentary. And I have to pretend that this whole, the human intellect is limited thing that gives way to the, gulf between the ideal and the real. I have to pretend all that's been solved by your stupid Vienna Circle nerds, you stupid calculating machine for brains, logicians. No, they didn't debunk any of that shit. There is a gulf, there is an ideal, the world is idea. Read that fucking chapter that I plugged in the poverty video. Read on the possibility of knowing the thing in itself. Your stupid Vienna Circle turds didn't debunk any of that. They couldn't even begin to frame the matter appropriately from the A, B, and C. No one's debunked idealism and you're operating within the principle of sufficient reason, and you're not daring to venture beyond by looking inward at what is unlike anything else, at what is toto genere, not subject to any of these other empirically demonstrable commonalities, but what is merely will. You're not doing what Schop says you need to do to begin to think clearly about the world. You're reading these clattering calculating machine for brain nerds from the Vienna Circle and such. So you're very fucking annoying, but yeah, I can't debunk those nerds off the cuff, because I just get way too rattled up. So you're gonna make me fucking write on a blog that I hope I finally abandon, and a blog that I hate. You're just gonna fucking make me do that. You did a lot of type stuff. You did a lot of type stuff in the other video. But he's insane. What I highlight in the poverty video, what I highlight in this fucking video, it's just all kinds of public madness. America as place where public madness reigns. And he's like, no, I'm gonna keep being a turd.
Collapse of any hope of fair play, where it's like, you want to do politics with people who understand that I'd rather lose fairly than win unfairly.
Yeah, based on whatever the previously agreed upon rules are, right? So just understand that. So what do you mean lose? Lose according to what criteria? There was generally speaking, in our societies here, not saying there's necessarily any wide-reaching previously agreed upon criteria in the societies you know of firsthand, first person, but elsewhere in the world, for decades on end, dare I say centuries, if we set aside the exceptions for the non-whites. But yeah, more or less, for centuries, there's agreed upon rules of fair play. And so, yeah, it's true of me, and I know it's true of me. I'd rather lose, how did I put it?
And dialogue kind of being grounded in that. And understand that I'd rather lose fairly than win unfairly.
It's a sword fight with my fingers.
Kind of being grounded in that.
But whatever, we can substitute it for something more specific. Yeah, it's true, explicit not. I'd rather lose democratically than win undemocratically. Don't you ever fucking show up in my yard and tell me I'm no better than people who clearly believe that yes, it's better to win even if you win unfairly. And yeah, that goes for some of the progs some of the time too. The progs who want to essentially disenfranchise 35 to 40% of the country. Disenfranchise them civilly and politically by just saying, yes, they're too dangerous because they're, fashy curious. No, you progs, you fucking morons. You don't politically disenfranchise your opposition, aka coded by saying, oh yeah, it's okay to punch Nazis. No, it's not fucking okay. The general public, is that fucking easy to manipulate? Then so be it. But yeah, free speech really has to mean all ideological speech ought to be protected speech. That's what free speech ought to be. Sorry, explicit not. I spiraled off on the progs. I don't need to. That part you don't need to hear. The only part you need to hear is don't ever show up in my fucking yard and insinuate that I'm no better because you think yourself as not being better, because you think it's all subjective. Yeah, the person who says I'd rather lose fairly than win unfairly is not as subjective as the motherfuckers who clearly would, if it takes cheating, they'd fucking do it. Because that's how clingy they are. Clingy to their status quo, or clingy to their desperate need for change, to change society, like the fucking progs, or to just stop the fascists. No, that's not me. I don't care. Let the worst happen, but let it be a fair play. I guess in our context, democratic fair play, our context here. But yeah, I understand, it's not just the MAGAs who are willing to cheat, clearly. Progs are willing to disenfranchise a large chunk of the country because a large chunk of the country is just that easy to manipulate and just that dangerous. And so when you stumble upon a user who puts it really succinctly, I'd rather lose fairly than win unfairly, don't you be coming by their yard and dropping all these insinuations that no, they're every bit as subjective as the rest of them. You may be, In the other video, he did a lot of typey type and said, yeah, I'm pretty much, I'm not going to pretend I'm better than anyone. Okay, don't pretend. But don't freaking think you can drag down people with integrity to your putrid level. Maybe he said it here. Maybe he said it here. What did I do? Yeah, in certain of my moods, you know, I can sound like I forget that nations are legal fictions in certain of my moods. But yeah, you fucking do this. You do this off the cuff. And you know, don't allow yourself to be tangled up every now and then in the passion of things. But yeah, most of the time when it sounds like I'm saying nations are something realer than the fictions they are, I just mean the administrations, the composites of the people in the administration. But okay, maybe a couple of times I may have made it sound like I believe nations are post-legal or whatever. So what else did you say? I think you also said that I might be duped by nostalgia by positing a better internet. You said that in the other video, which I have to get around to. But you know what? It's not nostalgia, explicit not. You just aren't seeing the past that I'm seeing. So this piece, I'll play a bit from this piece, but you know, the 90s and to some extent the 2010s, it really was fucking better. There were a hell of a lot of these, you know, just raw stream of consciousness vloggers. And that's just no longer a thing. It's just video essays, a bunch of other, you know, ad revenue crap. There wasn't, you know, we had a term. It was called e-begging. it was a term, and then all overnight it vanished. E-begging. And now, you know, commerce is just baked into the whole, you know, vlogging style. If I can even call it vlogging anymore. But yeah, it's not just my imagination or my nostalgia. I'll play this a bit.
Sell out. In the last 3 decades, youth culture has moved from a deep suspicion of commerce to a passionate defense of anti-commerce to an entire generation of creatives who leverage the commercial market to do even more commerce.
Yeah.
In the 1990s, there was a single ethical principle at the heart of youth culture: don't sell out.
Yes, it's when I grew up, explicit not. And I think it's when you grew up too, but see, you had the misfortune of being on the opposite side of the world, so you didn't experience it. The world was better. People weren't as slimy.
Out. There was a logic behind it. When artists serve the commercial marketplace, they blunt their pure artistic vision in compromising with conventional tastes.
Yeah.
This ethic was also core to subcultures, which were supposed to be social spaces for personal expression and community bonding, not style laboratories for the fashion industry. The ethics against commercial art set strong boundaries for alternative culture, which arguably allowed it to flourish as a separate entity. As that culture began to hit the mainstream in the early 1990s, the taboo against selling out spread into broader youth culture. As Chuck Klosterman writes in the 90s, the concept of selling out, and the degree to which that notion altered the meaning and perception of almost everything, is the single most 90s aspect of the 90s.
Yeah, and every single visible motherfucking YouTuber plugs bullshit and networks with others, and especially these breadtube assholes who can't do anything independently and all make cameos in each other's videos. And ooh, look how cliquish we are. Not just because we, you know, abide by all these shady online businesses and plug their shit, but we're also going to be super cliquish and show how cliquish we are by appearing in each other's videos and doing cameos and co-writing each other's videos. Fuck these people. You know, and fuck them for thinking they're representing some kind of, you know, homage to punk or this whole not selling out thing. You ought to be pissed off. Anyone who remembers this ought to be fucking pissed off. Instead, you know, explicit not's telling me, no, I ought to be more cold-blooded. You know, one of the only people who watches every video, and they have to be that fucking scummy. Instead of realizing that, yeah, it's time to get pissed the fuck off. It's not in my head. It's not nostalgia. It was different. It was better back then.
90s. The kids actually cared.
Yeah.
When mainstream radio began to play alternative music, middle school playgrounds erupted with debates on whether Rems, the Sidewinder Sleeps Tonight, crossed a dangerous pop line, and whether Stone Temple Pilots were just posers.
Yeah.
By the late 1990s, however, that very merger between alternative and mainstream culture made the debate around selling out seem very silly. Moreover, Britney Spears and the boy bands ushered in a return of manufactured pop. By the early 2000s, everyone, from Vice editors to Total Request Live viewers, agreed that selling out was a dated concept.
Yeah, but not on YouTube.
This backlash found its
old school YouTube still had some semblance of it, and yeah, we knew what e-begging was, and now e-begging is omnipresent, and Yeah, it's enough to make a man fly off the handle. It's enough to make a man fly off the handle when, I've been exposing. I've been ranting about it for so many years, and it just doesn't matter. Don't fucking tell me to dive deep into the logicism crap when, I'm just trying to cope with being as puny as I am in terms of my impact. I needs a bigger impact. Then I might incorporate the logicism crap. But first I gotta take all these motherfuckers to task and make them see that, they've gotten away with bullshit for far too long, and not because they have the wrong political views. No, just because their whole aspect is pukey. I'm puny and they're pukey. And I'm gonna do something about it. Beyond the video making thing. But I sure as shit am not gonna learn symbolic logic. the language of symbolic logic. I'll learn ancient Greek before I learn that bullshit.
It can be a little bit, literally, repetitious. And I feel a little bit like that every time Israel starts killing people in Gaza. And how do I bring you into this conversation afresh? How do I keep your interest? Because the question that is on the tip of my tongue, we came close to asking on Thursday of last week, which is about caring. And it's about the fact that the world doesn't care enough, or at least our bit of the world doesn't care enough. I've got two
and there's people who they don't care, and then if you care, they begin to care. That's the perversity of it. It's not just enough to not care, no. They want to make others be as careless.
Benjamin Netanyahu.
Yeah. We ought to care.
They must not.
We ought to care. We ought to care because it could be us. It could be us. No one's immune. So yeah, game theoretically, we ought to care.
President Trump briefed on these strikes before they were carried out. Gave his full support. The White House gave his full support.
As one does.
And the situation on the ground in Gaza remains as hideous as it has been now for months. Hospitals already buckling under the pressure of having scant resources, limited personnel, overcrowded rooms and beds, people in tents of course, among the targets, among the...
That's what you get with a Trumpy ceasefire.
For want of a better word, hit by the latest Israeli attack, and the hospitals...
I wonder if Zelensky is still coveting a Trumpy type of ceasefire when we see how they end.
Red Cross.
And what the consequences are for ending a Trumpy ceasefire.
Nations Amnesty doing all of these things, pointing out all of these things, and yet who is listening?
When you covet things that impossible, you're worse off than anyone can even imagine. When you just covet things that you covet a Trumpy stamped and insured ceasefire, you must be more desperate than anyone can grasp.
The people welcoming the strikes could be loosely described as hardliners.
Yeah.
It is a shattering of a fragile ceasefire. Make no mistake, but Bezalel Smotrich is delighted. It is a phased operation that we have planned and built in recent weeks, he has said, making it clear that there was never any intention to abide by either the timetable or the content of the original truce. This moment is why we remained in the government, he added, in case you think my analysis is a little bit wrong. This moment is why we remained in the government. In other words, Netanyahu had to resume the killing in order to keep power. Here's one from Sue. Here we go. Here he goes.
I think Netanyahu's also a psychopath.
Paddy O'Brien, lapping up everything the Palestinian health BS throws out. Do us a favour and stop believing the lying scum. Okay, Sue, so I'm going to believe Bezalel Smotrich,
we disagree
the finance minister in Benjamin Netanyahu's government.
Yes.
And he is telling you, because I've already seen this, but it's going to be news to you, this is a phased operation that we have planned and built in recent weeks. This moment is why we remained in the government. And he had, as I'm sure you know, Sue, previously threatened to pull out of the ruling coalition if Israel didn't restart its war against Hamas. In other words, if Israel didn't abandon the truce. You'll also be aware, of course, that Netanyahu has sacked his intelligence chief, who was looking into allegations that other members...
Ceasefire, scheme fire.
You have to choose. It's Christ or sex trafficking?
Sometimes it's worth starting with the punchline. Because you think, it's just some kind of exaggeration, but no. It's no exaggeration. Sometimes you don't have to choose. You can have it all. It's the American way. You can have Christ and sex trafficking. And it's not even an exaggeration.
I think that's a good use of his time. I
I know, but why does the burden have to fall on me, David?
I went back. I went back too
amazed
far.
That the person he
Here we
appointed
go.
to head the Senate,
Here's the setup.
is the same.
Setup to the thing that's not an exaggeration.
Same man has said we want more Christ in the Christmas pageant at the Convention Center, but is also the same man who was sent to the Munich Security Conference to spring the Tate brothers out of that was Richard Gunnell too, and so you think, a lot of people think you have to choose, it's Christ or sex trafficking.
But no.
But in MAGA, you can have both. You can put the sex trafficking back in Christmas.
It's the American ways. You can have it all.
Did you see?
But I guess, both
Christ or sex trafficking.
Yeah.
But no.
But in MAGA, you can have both. You can put the sex.
Trying to rein in sex trafficking is PC. Every bit as PC as trying to, rein in whatever Christmas pageants and make it more, inclusive.
Trafficking back in Christmas. That's
Did you
it all
see
connects.
the item about this member of Congress who had introduced legislation? Actually, I think he was in a state office, but anyway, introduced legislation to make it to make Trump derangement syndrome a recognized mental disorder, and was just arrested for soliciting a 16-year-old girl.
You don't
say. As the late Christopher Hitchens used to say, you can set your watch by it.
There you go. It's always the ones you most expect. All right, but okay, so they are.
But what was it? Trump derangement
disorder.
Yeah,
and,
Trump.
To make Trump derangement syndrome a recognized mental disorder.
Remember Trump engagement syndrome? It's one of the many things I floated. It's a track, but it's one of the many things I floated a few years ago, and it didn't catch on. Trump engagement syndrome. Just engaging in the Trump phenomenon is as bad as being deranged by it. Remember that?
And was just arrested for soliciting a 16-year-old.
I guess the news is so crazy that even I've succumbed to my own mockery of Trump engagement syndrome. I have engaged.
As late Christopher Hitchens
because how do you not?
Set your watch.
How do you not? When you can set your watch. I fall prey to Trump engagement syndrome.
It's always the ones.
As late Christopher Hitchens used to say, you can set your watch.
Because you can set your watch by it.
So, David, you went to law school, right? You rarely talk about it, but
PTSD.
Yeah, my thoughts exactly. Not that I found out firsthand, but every now and then, when it's a mind that kind of clicks with my mind, and they've got some dealings with the law school, it's PTSD. Yeah. It's funny, but then if you had to pay for it, it wouldn't have been funny. I mean, both pay for it psychologically and monetarily. Because it's also expensive. They give you PTSD and they take your money. But I knew better. Man, look at it go.
Harder sometimes to see the benefits because they're more dispersed. What are the benefits that America has gotten since World War II of being the leading superpower by keeping the sea lanes open? What have been the benefits to America that sometimes it's not so easy to hold up that Americans might not understand?
Well, let me say first, I think people on all sides of the political spectrum, liberal Democrats and some Republicans as well, make a mistake by effectively saying we're doing all this for the greater good of mankind, that we're just concerned about conditions all over the world and we're nice people and that's why we do all this. We are nice people, and we...
He just still says it. He goes on about the pathology of MAGA more than a lot of people, and yet he still says we are nice people. Funny that.
We do a lot for...
Yeah, but you start a lot of fires too, don't you, John? Don't you guys start a lot of fires? Can't we say that some of the calamity has spilled over into Europe by way of migration because of the adventurism you championed? Not saying you championed it maliciously, but still, sloppiness and hubris led to calamity in many parts of the world and then to mass migrations into Europe. And now what? You've been a net benefit to Europe? I don't know, maybe for a few decades in the 20th century, but not this century, if you tally up all the calamity leading to migration into Europe. Get real, John.
Friends and allies who don't.
But you do get real in a second. No, you haven't crunched the burden numbers, because you're just ignoring the, all the fleeing that happened into Europe because, in part and arguably in large part, the very adventurism you championed. So yes, you were nice people for a number of decades, a few decades ago, and then you just became sloppy people. Well, let's speed you up.
That's clear, and we should work to make friends and allies bear their fair share of the burden. But here's the real point. We're not doing it for them. We're doing it for us.
Yeah.
The provision of order that we've made in the world, we and our allies...
John Bolton, I don't care what anyone says, John Bolton can do real talk. Listen to it.
1945 should work to make friends and allies bear their fair share of the burden. But here's the real point. We're not doing it for them.
Yeah.
We're doing it for us.
Yeah, that's real talk.
The provision of order that we've made in the world, we and our allies since 1945, is what has kept what peace...
So, it's just like I said in the video. I said, agree with some stuff when it comes to all these neocons, disagree with others.
Is, and it hasn't been perfect.
Other parts, I mean.
Perfect. Has allowed the growth of economic interaction all over the world.
That part is true.
Brought the greatest prosperity seen in history.
Yeah, there's a difference between South Korea and North Korea, and that difference, what are you going to attribute it to? Other than, his adventurism.
Including to us. Trade, travel,
so Koreans were done right by the U.S., whereas Europe, it's a toss-up these days.
The revolution is incredible, and it rests fundamentally since 1945 on American power. We're doing it because it's in our interest. If we didn't do it, one of two things would happen. One, there'd be spreading chaos around the world as the order collapsed, or two, our adversaries would move in to take advantage of it. We're doing this because we're looking out for our interest. Yeah. And nobody else is going to look out for our interest better than we are. If we don't do it, if we pull back, if we look at the Houthis blocking the Red Sea maritime passage, as J.D. Vance did, and say, that's just for the Europeans to take care of, that's a narrow, cramped vision of the world. Yeah. It's been a principle.
So, you could say it's a low bar, but he's not as wretched as J.D. Vance and the J.D. Vances of the world.
Has been a principle.
But yeah, sure, low bar.
U.S. policy.
But it's the times we're in. We should give props even to the people who just barely meet the low bar, and that's all that was meant. And whatever, I didn't even, I played from that thing in the video on poverty on the John Bolton thing, but it's as if John Bolton wasn't even in that video. Just talked over him. But John Bolton, give the people who meet the minimal low bar threshold, give them the props, because it's just the times we're in.
We were a country, and we do it around the world, not because of the specific dollars and cents value of trade in one particular geographic location, but because we insist on it on a worldwide basis. So,
it's as if I was this, wide-eyed supporter of John Bolton. No, it's just, clearly he could have just ran with the MAGA thing and maybe even had a position in the administration, but he's like, no, I'm not, because it's sick. MAGA is sick. And he would have been more prominent in American politics, but he said no because he chose principles. Now there are adventurous principles and sloppy principles, and Abu Ghraib and all kinds of horrible things and torment and torture, and didn't really apologize for it. But it's not all bad. It's not all bad. And the bar is low, and so, any one of them who could have simply gone and stayed MAGA and didn't, because they have genuine disagreements, it's like, it deserves a nod. At least it deserves a nod. Not like massive applause, but, a nod. Not even a golf clap, but just a nod.
I would say we need more argumentation by political leaders on why this world order we have created benefits us. I'm glad other people benefit from it too, because we are nice people and generous, but we're doing it because on balance, it benefits us.
The 30 to 40% that's still, pro-Trump, are they nice people, John?
Us more than anybody else.
I want to close, Mr. Ambassador, with the remaining minute or two we have left, and just ask you, you for years were at the center of Republican politics, foreign policy, thinking, what is this kind of new role now that you're a little bit on the outside because of your relationship with Donald Trump, been like for you? What is it like to be kind of on the periphery? Are you still able to advise senators or people even within the Trump administration, or do you feel exiled in some way?
Well, I do talk to plenty of people whose names I try and keep private so they don't incur the wrath of Trump. But look, when I began my political career,
so also, he'll always discuss how fearful the people on the inside are. So that's always good. People who are just willing to point out that, a lot of the people who play the MAGA game, they actually still agree with me more, but they're too afraid to point it out. And it's good when people point that out. Man, look at it go.
That also was very moving because, she wants to feel...
George Conway says he cares about his country. I can't make fun of it the way I do with the rest of them, because here's what a man who actually cares about his country looks like.
They want to stand up for something. People want to stand up for something.
Yeah.
And I wanted them to know people are listening to them.
Some people.
And it was good to know that people are listening to us.
He cares about the law, but the law is really because he cares about the country.
Own this together. And this is a fight for so much more than profits for partner. This is a fight for democracy. This is a fight for the rule of law. And some people just don't give a shit. And that makes me angry.
Yeah.
But to see these granddaughters of Judge Rifkin,
say yes to civil society. That's what it is you got to say yes. At the end of the day, you got to say yes to civil society. Some people would say no to civil society.
The eloquence of their words was really profoundly moving. Sorry.
That's okay. I think that part of what sometimes gets lost in the fights that we're having in the political moment is the fact that one of the things that drives you into this space is that we really cared about certain values, both as conservatives, for you as a legal professor, for me as somebody who believed in what America stands for, pluralism and free speech and the rule of law, and being raised to profoundly care about those things, to think that they mattered, and to have the people who I tweeted about something like this the other day because I was raised up in sort of institutional conservative environments. I worked at a conservative think tank after college, and had been sort of around the conservative movement, but Heritage and all of the groups. I went to all these talks at all these places where they talked about the Constitution and all of these values.
It's all just tentacles of civil society. It's good things.
Free markets, for example.
Just because it sounds hokey and because people take advantage of it and all that stuff. Doesn't mean that when it's under siege, it doesn't mean we ought not care when it's under siege. I'd be saying that even if I weren't really close to where all the action is, where all the havoc is, I'd be saying the same thing. We ought to care ideally, not just care because it's, threatens our real ends, more or less. But we ought to care in that ideal sense. But, Sarah's going to point out how, oh shit, I thought a lot of people that I worked with cared about it in an ideal sense. It was just real ends, and he just used rhetoric to make it seem more fanciful than it is. But it was all rhetoric for them.
It is disorienting and genuinely heartbreaking when the people that you listened to, who helped you develop your values, abandon them all so quickly. Because you're like, well, wait a second, I genuinely did this because I think this is you joined the legal profession, and
you wouldn't have been as taken aback if you had just read Schop. Schop said it. Most people, it's not just they don't have ideal ends. They cannot, properly speaking, conceive of them. It's all real ends.
Really good friends with lawyers, they hit you with a lot of this is a revered profession. You have a real role that you play in society. There are these invisible lines that you help maintain for the Constitution. And then to have everybody just act then like it doesn't matter at all is bizarre.
Spouses, it hurts. It really, really hurts. I mean, you think that at some point, again, you get carried away.
Who didn't see it coming with certain figures, right? Did you guys really not see it coming with Kellyanne Conway, not to be confused with George Conway, not related, but Kellyanne Conway, who didn't see it coming? Mel Gibson, there's been a lot of them. Ann Coulter, we all saw it coming. Though I guess even Ann Coulter every now and then makes a pipsqueak about just how far fraudsters going with the El Salvadorian prison stuff. Yeah, even Ann Coulter, makes a queef here and there about it going too far.
you're on Team Republican and maybe you're on Team MAGA for a while, but at some point you just have to take a step back and just say, how did we get here?
Yeah,
I've done
a
something
lot
wrong.
of psychopaths in your former party.
Cool. And not enough people have done that, and it really.
Not enough.
And when
Too many people have
you know-
said no to civil society, and they said yes to Kingdom Come, Trumpian Kingdom Come.
Oh, it's really, really hard.
They
it
needed
still bothers me.
Trump to be king.
It's the thing about Trumpism that will bother me till the day I die. Is that
And Barron is going to be Kodos when Trump dies. Kang and
at
Kodos.
some point, is it worth? How can you look yourself in the mirror?
Yeah.
And I get it. I mean, I get it. I mean, yeah, you have objections to this, that, and the other thing. Maybe there are policy, immigration, so on.
They're killing babies. I can't vote against Trump. The other guys are killing babies.
You don't want to take people off the street with no due process, blindfold them, shove them on planes, and send them to an El Salvador prison where they can be tortured and nobody knows whatever happens to them. And the government says, whatever. What's the difference between that and sending them on the trains eastbound? What is that?
What's the difference between me and
How
you?
can you justify that? How can you live with that? I mean, even Joe Rogan the other day was saying, I don't know if I like this.
Even
And culture, you know, it's like,
it's not Joe. Listen up. I'm going to tell you the Slavic way to say things. It's not Joe. It's Joe. And it's apropos because it makes him sound dumber. And he deserves to be made to sound dumber because he is dumb.
So, you know, people just going out there and pretending it's all okay because it
But
doesn't affect them.
it's heavy. Sorry, I don't mean to take away from the heavy. It's all heavy. It's just man, look at it go. Look at it go.
This administration is profoundly evil. Profoundly evil in ways that are difficult for Americans to comprehend. We have reached a stage of illegality, immorality.
Don't do the scare. The point is perfectly fine, but listen to that.
Profoundly evil in ways that are difficult for Americans to comprehend.
I really want to like you. It's not just that I'm saying I really want to like you, and the point stands on its own. Why do the scary, cliche scary Hollywood music?
We have reached a stage of illegality, immorality.
The point stands. You cheapen the point when in political commentary you make it Hollywood. You cheapen the point. You know, fence sitter will see through it.
And depravity in a federal administration.
Oh, but maybe, you know, fewer fence sitters will see through it than will be swayed by it, so then it's okay to do. Because we're the bulwark and Trump is just that bad. I agree, Trump is just that bad. But don't sway by Hollywood tactics. Listen to this.
Administration, illegality, immorality, evil.
Profoundly evil in ways
that are difficult for Americans to comprehend.
I'm not an amoral cunt, so I can grant when someone is evil.
We have reached a
I don't
stage
shudder.
of illegality, immorality,
and
depravity.
Don't be afraid of your noble sides, people, your ideal sides.
You know, having, I'm not getting a political discussion here because everybody's got the right to vote for whomever they choose. Roll Tide. Yeah, but some people can't understand why Trump's got popularity has. And some people say, he was a great president. It's all subjective.
Oh, okay.
And so anyway,
there's at least one really smart person or whatever, well-read person who just said bingo, Jim Ross. But it ain't me.